Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case, the case of Maria Fernanda Quesada. For most people, family is the most important aspect of life. However, finding a trustworthy partner who can be the ideal husband and father is not always easy. Infatuation can cloud judgment, leading some individuals to commit to unsuitable partners, which can sometimes turn life into a nightmare. Maria Fernanda Quesada lived in La Gloria, Nueva Costa Rica. Born in 1994, she was a kind and beautiful girl. She was a strong and independent woman with dreams of becoming a mother. She wasn't overly focused on her career. Instead, she valued the warmth and comfort of a family. She wished for siblings, but was her parents' only child. Her family is close-knit and loving, often held up as a model for other families. Her parents provided her with a comfortable home and a good education, which is still not accessible to everyone in Costa Rica. The environment there is not as favorable as in many other Latin American countries. Maria had a great relationship with her family, and she was especially close to her maternal aunt. They were similar in age, shared experiences, supported one another, and regularly met and communicated. Maria shared all her secrets with her aunt, and they felt like best friends. People recognized Maria as a friendly and outgoing person who could easily connect with strangers, which helped her make many friends. She fell in love for the first time at 19, believing it was a genuine feeling that would lead to happiness, a family, children, and a cozy cottage by the sea. Unfortunately, the reality was different. Her boyfriend took advantage of her and left when he became interested in someone else. To make matters worse, Maria discovered she was pregnant at that time. 9 months later, she gave birth to a boy. She hoped her ex-boyfriend would care for their son, but he showed no interest in either of them. Faced with this situation, Maria had to work hard to support herself and her child, as their financial situation was tight. She wanted to provide her son with a future as good as the one her parents had given her. Fortunately, her parents did not abandon her or the baby. They continued to support them, which helped create a stable environment for the child. During this challenging time, the family offered her the support she needed. Although it was difficult, they all managed to get through it together. This all took place during a time of advanced technology, which allowed Maria to use a computer and access the internet. She didn't want to just wait for things to improve. Instead, she sought an additional source of income by learning how to make handmade soap. After trying her hand at this craft, she discovered she had the potential for even more. This marked the beginning of Maria's journey as a skilled professional with a variety of talents. In addition to selling handmade soap to friends and online, she also learned how to do manicures. She created several groups on social media to showcase her skills, and her client base quickly began to expand. Maria dreamed of building her own website and eventually opening a salon. From the start, her efforts received positive feedback, and her clients were happy with her services. At this point, her main focus was on the well-being of her child and family, and she dedicated her free time to them. Maria longed for love and a family. She dreamed of finding a man to complete her. One day, while she was out in the city gathering materials, she met Esteban Rovira Vargas. He was 16 years older than she was, and despite their age difference, Maria fell deeply in love with him. It's unclear how he left such a strong impression on her, as he was very different from her. Esteban was hot-tempered and aggressive, with a complicated past linked to crime, although he avoided discussing it. Their romance lasted several months before Maria felt ready to introduce him to her family. The meeting was chaotic. Esteban made such a strong impact that her parents were firmly opposed to him. The primary issue with her parents stemmed from Esteban's rudeness, foul language, and blatant disrespect towards others. He came across as cruel and unpredictable. When Maria's parents noticed this, Esteban reacted so violently that Maria had to intervene to prevent a scandal. In the end, Maria's parents insisted that she completely end her relationship, but their efforts were in vain. Maria had strong feelings for Esteban and was determined to stay with him no matter what. Understanding this, her parents reconciled, not wanting to jeopardize their relationship with their daughter or lose the chance to have a future grandchild. A few days later, Maria met Esteban's family, who were just like him, tough and unkind, which made Maria uncomfortable. She confided in her aunt that Esteban was the most reasonable person in his family. Despite his difficult personality, their relationship continued to grow. Esteban appears surprisingly calm around Maria, seemingly relying on her to help curb his temper. On April 6, 2019, they got married. Unfortunately, shortly after the wedding, Esteban revealed that Maria's parents had been right about him. He became increasingly abusive, starting to physically assault her almost immediately. The abuse happened every day, and Maria suffered both physical and emotional torment while trying to keep their new family together. Moreover, she was pregnant with their second child, which made her feel that if she could just hold on, things would improve after the baby was born. Above all, Maria did not want to raise another child without a father. Maria gave birth to her second child in 2020 and became increasingly overwhelmed by the situation. Just before the baby arrived, she moved in with her parents because she could no longer cope and was worried about her health and the baby's safety. After the birth, her husband seemed to have a change of heart. He visited her, sincerely apologized for his past mistakes and the pain he had caused, thanked her for their new son, and promised never to hurt her or argue with her again. Maria believed her plan had worked, but her family, especially her mother and aunt, remained skeptical. They recognized this behavior as typical of manipulators and feared the cycle would repeat. In the following months, Esteban genuinely devoted his free time to Maria and their newborn. He behaved like a caring husband and father, refraining from violence. It appeared that their family life was improving, and they began to share joyful moments together. Esteban also started to spend more time with Maria's older son, who was 7 at the time. However, Maria noticed that he seemed to show more affection for his biological child. Despite this, she felt happy about the positive changes. Esteban even changed jobs, securing a well-paying position as a Spanish teacher in a private school for foreign students, which greatly improved their financial situation. Maria frequently told her friends and family that she was genuinely happy, and even her aunt began to believe it might be true. Maria often kept in touch with her family, sharing that after the birth of their son, Esteban changed drastically. He managed to hide his aggressive and cruel nature, making family life feel like the fairy tale she had always wanted. During this time, they posted many family photos on social media, portraying themselves as happy parents with their children. It appeared to be a happy and healthy family. In this seemingly peaceful environment, more than a year went by. However, Esteban was actually suppressing his anger, which was building up like a tightly wound spring, ready to snap. Eventually, he lost control. He shouted at his wife for no reason and physically harmed her, leaving bruises on her face. Maria, in tears, turned to her relatives to share what had happened. She was reluctant to go to the police, hoping that things would improve and that she could keep the family together for their child's sake. Unfortunately, the situation worsened quickly. After just a few incidents, Esteban began to pressure and torment her even more than he had before the baby was born. Her relatives urged her to end the relationship. Esteban had reverted to the cruel person he had always been, unable to control his inner demons. In December 2021, Maria decided she could no longer endure the abuse. She reported her husband, Esteban. When Maria went to the police station to file her report, she presented fresh bruises on her body. Esteban had struck her so hard that she had visible hematomas on her face. She expressed that this situation could not continue any longer. Maria was frightened for her safety and her children's well-being. During the police investigation, her claims were supported by both her family and several neighbors who had witnessed Esteban's aggressive behavior. Neighbors witnessed that she had faced constant abuse from her husband. He would provoke arguments almost every day, which often escalated into brutal beatings. Maria was so beaten down that she feared talking to Esteban, worried it would lead to another fight. Maria was frequently seen with bruises, and the cause was always the same. Ultimately, she was able to obtain a restraining order, which prohibited Esteban from approaching her or their son without her permission. She moved in with her relatives along with her sons. Maria warned her family that her husband should not be allowed near their home. If he was seen, they should call the police. Even after obtaining a restraining order, Esteban was often spotted near the Quesada family's home. While he appeared to be loitering, it was clear he was looking for a chance to see Maria. Each time he was seen uninvited, he would leave quickly to avoid provoking a police call, but he continued to appear in the area, which was very concerning. Maria and Esteban were going through a divorce, along with custody and property disputes. Unfortunately, the process was progressing too slowly. Maria hoped to prove her husband's cruelty to ensure he would lose the chance to see their son. She feared that if he had contact with the boy, he would suffer the same abuse she had endured. On March 3, 2022, he showed up at Maria's parents' house without her permission. Some of her relatives were there, and they greeted Esteban with displeasure at the door. He requested to speak with Maria to address some issues regarding their divorce, emphasized that the discussion would focus on the division of their shared property. Witnesses present during the meeting observed that, despite his calm demeanor, Esteban was struggling to control his emotions. Maria consented to talk with her husband, particularly since he was not shouting or using foul language as he typically did. However, her family was concerned and advised her not to leave with a man they viewed as dangerous. Esteban insisted that Maria accompany him to retrieve some personal items she had forgotten during their hasty move. He also requested that their conversation remain private. Eventually, he persuaded her to get into the car. Esteban asked Maria to leave their older son with relatives, but he wants her to take the younger son with her. Maria agreed to this arrangement. As soon as they left her parents' house, arguments erupted again, starting the moment they were in the car. Esteban became more aggressive and eventually lost his temper, shouting loudly. They pulled over near the Quesada family home, where a neighbor noticed them arguing inside the car. Upon arriving at the house where they had lived before separating, noise and upheaval could be heard. It seemed that Esteban was breaking things or physically harming his wife again. The child was crying from inside the house. Their 2-year-old son could be heard pleading with his father to stop. Outside, a neighbor heard Maria calling for help. The neighbor rushed to the house but realized he had left his phone behind and couldn't call the police. At that moment, Esteban called his sister, revealing that he had just killed his ex-wife in front of their son, claiming she had attacked him first. His sister was horrified and urged him to take the child and go to the police, but he ignored her. Instead, Esteban left the scene of the crime, still wearing the blood-stained shirt from the incident. He placed the child in the front passenger seat of the car and quickly drove away. Several neighbors called the police, and Esteban's sister also reported the incident. When the police arrived, Esteban had already left the scene. They sealed off the area where Maria was lying, where she was attacked by her husband in the kitchen. The police spoke to the neighbors who were gathered outside Esteban's home. The neighbors confirmed that Esteban had a long history of violent behavior. He was generally disliked in the community due to his rude and aggressive demeanor, often shouting at people for no reason, leading people to keep their distance. Although Maria eventually left him and obtained a restraining order, she made the mistake of getting back into his car. Meanwhile, a white car was driving down the road with Esteban and their 2-year-old son inside. The child was the only witness to the horrific murder, watching as his father stabbed his mother 11 times, mainly in her upper body and head. Maria tried to fight back, but she was powerless. Judging by the position of several wounds, Esteban had likely attacked her from behind. It did not seem as though she had provoked him. Her desperate attempts to fend off his assault were doomed to fail. Realizing that Esteban was trying to escape with their child, a large-scale operation was organized to capture him. The criminal's vehicle was put on alert, and several patrol units were dispatched to intercept him. His condition and intentions were unclear, and the child might be in danger. The police were hesitant to use force to stop the suspect because they feared for the boy's safety. Instead, they decided to follow Esteban. However, catching or even locating him proved to be extremely difficult. Shortly after the search began, officers found Esteban's abandoned car just a few kilometers from the scene of the violent incident, suggesting that Esteban had already switched vehicles. The police had no information about the car Esteban was currently using, and it appeared that he and the child had only one escape route, crossing the border. This raised the risk of losing track of them entirely, as Esteban could take a bus, use another car, or get a ride from someone. The authorities set up checkpoints in hopes of catching Esteban when he tried to cross the border. Fortunately, their strategy paid off. Within a few hours, they tracked him down at a checkpoint while he was attempting to pass through in a stolen vehicle. The border officers had been notified, so when he presented his identification, the chase ended. Esteban was arrested without any resistance. His 2-year-old son had been in the passenger seat the whole time and thankfully had not been harmed. During the search of the vehicle, authorities discovered a firearm and a blood-stained knife, which could have been the murder weapon used against Maria. It was puzzling why the suspect had not disposed of these items earlier. He was promptly sent to the police in his hometown and imprisoned. Esteban now faced serious charges of femicide and was subject to severe penalties typically imposed for such crimes in Latin America. After investigating the knife found in the vehicle, it was confirmed that the blood on it belonged to Maria, and the handle carried Esteban's fingerprints, leaving no doubt about his guilt. The custody of Maria's children was to be transferred to her parents. The older child was quickly placed in the care of Maria's parents. However, there were troubles involving the younger child. Even though Esteban had murdered the child's mother right in front of him and was awaiting trial in prison, Esteban still retained custody rights over the child under Costa Rican law. The boy became embroiled in a custody dispute between the families of his biological parents. The Vargas family aggressively sought custody, employing questionable tactics. They attempted to discredit Maria, suggesting that this could somehow excuse the murder. They claimed that Maria had neglected her sons for a long time and did not care for them properly. Instead, she pressured Esteban, which led him to lash out at her. Ultimately, they suggested that one day, during a heated argument related to their divorce, Maria attacked Esteban, leaving him no choice but to defend himself with a kitchen knife, resulting in wounds inflicted to stop her. They also attempted to portray Maria's parents negatively, arguing that they were unfit guardians. Maria's relatives had long spoken of her suffering from psychological and physical abuse, with accusations of beatings and threats supported by family, friends, and neighbors. Esteban's family depicted him as a victim, which many found hard to believe. Of course, this was a blatant lie. However, statements from Esteban's relatives complicated the prosecution's investigation, forcing them to challenge these claims and gather evidence to support the Quesada family. As a result, a meeting was held to address the situation, which sparked activism from various feminist groups closely following this troubling case of violence. In March 2023, large protests demonstrated strong support for the victim's family. It was evident that the misleading narrative from Esteban and his relatives did not convince anyone, except perhaps the defense. The public wanted to ensure that the murderer faced severe punishment. Women across the country asserted that a lack of accountability only led to more violent crimes, and the statistics clearly supported their claims. The trial of Esteban Rivera Vargas, who abused his family, resumed in Santa Cruz on March 9, 2023. The prosecution argued that he deliberately killed his wife. In contrast, the defense, supported by Esteban and his family, claimed that he was actually the victim. However, their claims were quickly proven false, as the prosecution presented multiple witnesses, including neighbors, who testified to Esteban's violent behavior. Sadly, Maria's youth and innocence led her to make poor decisions, while the Vargas family's lies were exposed through forensic analysis, which conclusively resolved the case. The nature of Maria's injuries ruled out the possibility that she had attacked Esteban. 2 strikes to her back clearly indicated a planned assault. Esteban had intended to harm her from the outset. Maria's younger son could not serve as a witness due to his age. However, recordings of conversations with their 2-year-old child were presented in court. These recordings revealed that Esteban repeatedly acted aggressively and often assaulted Maria. The older son also testified, corroborating his brother's claims about the violence inflicted by Esteban. Both children were afraid of him, especially the older son, who was not Esteban's biological child and held a strong bias against him. As a result of their traumatic experiences and the loss of their mother, both sons were sent for psychological treatment. The prosecution sought a 37-year prison sentence for the defendant, while the defense maintained his innocence throughout the trial, attempting to reduce his sentence and even aiming for an acquittal. Fortunately, these efforts were unsuccessful. In May 2023, the court ruled in favor of Maria. The defendant, Esteban Rivera Vargas, was sentenced to 35 years and 8 months in prison, and he is currently serving his sentence in a maximum security facility. Additionally, Esteban was ordered to pay 75 million Costa Rican colones in compensation to Maria's family. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Elizabeth Johnson. Elizabeth Johnson was 23 years old, and her husband was 25. They lived in Tempe, Arizona, USA. Although on the surface they appear to be a happy couple, their reality is much different. Elizabeth's life has been through many hardships, which have negatively impacted her relationships. Her parents were addicted to illegal substances and barely cared for her, forcing her to grow up in poverty. Fortunately, her time in this dreadful environment was short-lived. Her mother passed away when she was still young, drowning after losing consciousness from an overdose of illegal drugs. At that time, her father was also in a state of madness and could not help her. A few years later, her father died from liver disease, which was also linked to his addictions. After these incidents, Elizabeth was sent to an orphanage. Several families adopted her, but then they returned her to the orphanage. These childhood damage caused Elizabeth much suffering. She had behavioral problems and was often labeled a problem child. Now she's faced with adult problems that she doesn't know how to handle. Those who knew her well said she was immature for her age, and she lived in constant fear of abandonment. This fear made her intensely jealous of her boyfriend, Logan. Elizabeth had difficulty controlling her emotions, leading to severe psychological stress. This often resulted in conflicts with her lover, Logan. During these conflicts, she frequently lost control and sometimes physically attacked him. Her immaturity made her unable to understand her own actions. Despite this, Logan loved her, and they got married after dating for a few months. He hopes that marriage will help she change. Unfortunately, her fear grew and her tantrums became very disturbing. For example, during a picnic, they had a fight, and Logan narrowly avoided falling into the fire. He only suffered minor burns. However, when she wasn't aggressive, they seemed like a great couple. Treat each other well and have the ability to become an ideal family. Logan was already suspicious of Elizabeth's change, but he continued to hope for the best. Sometime after the marriage, they discover that Elizabeth is pregnant, which was a big surprise for them. They feel unprepared to become parents. Initially, they had planned to establish themselves before having children, so Elizabeth decided she did not want to become a mother. However, she later changed her mind and chose to continue with the pregnancy. Their son, Gabriel, was born on May 3, 2009. Unfortunately, this did nothing to make Elizabeth more mature. She still behaved like a child. According to those around her, her anger outbursts became unpredictable. During these times, she would latch on to minor issues to provoke conflicts. Gabriel is quite difficult, and she has to try very hard to control him. The boy always wanted to be comforted, and whenever Elizabeth left him alone, he would start crying. His cries irritated her, causing her to lose her temper and yell. It was a chaotic situation, and Logan trying to stay calm for the sake of the child. During that period, Logan worked hard to support his young family, which often kept him away from home. At home, he always tries to help his wife and take care of the children. He wanted to be close to his son, but Elizabeth's temperament made things difficult. Not only was she as volatile as before, but baby's constant crying and irritability made her ready to lash out at Logan over minor issues. Her jealousy increased. She becomes more suspicious of Logan's interactions with other women. Her fear of being abandoned turned into panic, haunting her. Everything is getting worse and worse. Elizabeth accused Logan of loving their son, Gabriel, too much. She even grew jealous of the child, convinced that Logan loved her less since his birth. During her angry outbursts, her behavior became more extreme. She started smashing things, including household appliances and dishes. On one occasion, she even took a kitchen knife and cut up the sofa and her son's bed. Logan finds it very difficult living in such an environment. During these episodes, he feared for his life and the safety of the son. He wanted to be close to his child, but he didn't want to continue to endure Elizabeth's anger. Finally, he ran out of patience, especially when Elizabeth didn't change. After a few months of living like this, Logan announced that he wanted a divorce and moved out with his son, Gabriel. Elizabeth's childhood fears and traumas return, but she never takes responsibility for what happened. Instead, she blamed her husband, Logan, calling him narrow-minded. Worst of all, she began to threaten to give Gabriel up for adoption. Logan assured her that he could take care of the baby himself, making such an action unnecessary. Unfortunately, Elizabeth saw this as a new way to manipulate the situation and frequently used this threat against Logan. When Logan consulted a lawyer, he learned that by law, Elizabeth could not arbitrarily let someone else adopt their son, Gabriel. If the child's biological father disagreed, they would need to settle custody arrangements in court. Elizabeth could have given full custody to he, but she didn't want to. She just wanted to control him longer and get revenge. Eventually, they divorced, and they were granted joint custody. However, her erratic behavior made he feel it was unsafe for their son, Gabriel, to stay with her, so he sought full custody. This process took time. Meanwhile, the boy lived with his father, and his mother visited him according to their agreement. Over time, Elizabeth seemed to become less anxious and calmer. What happened at Elizabeth's house when Logan wasn't there was unclear. The situation might have been worsening. As Christmas approached, Logan planned to spend the holiday with his family. He had a grand vacation in mind. They would meet Santa Claus and give Gabriel his first Christmas presents. But this plan was not to be. On December 18, 2009, Logan was supposed to pick up Gabriel from Elizabeth's house around 4 p.m. However, when he arrived, no one opened the door and the car was not in the driveway. This was strange, because they had planned that he would visit and he will take Gabriel away. Then, he continued to knock. By this point, They had a well-established custody arrangement for the child. Everyone was accustomed to it, so Elizabeth's actions seemed unusual. She couldn't just take Gabriel and go wherever she pleased. Logan looked through the bedroom window and saw furniture boxes scattered and emptied on the floor. He thinks she's gone crazy again. She must have packed her things and taken Gabriel away to an unknown location, so he became very worried and immediately contacted the police. Unfortunately, by law, nothing could be done because Elizabeth was Gabriel's biological mother. She was the child's legal guardian. The authorities ignored Logan's worries. Although this made him feel discomfort, he was forced to go home. For the following days, nobody managed to reach Elizabeth. She remained silent. No one understood what had happened, making the situation more complicated. Only Logan and his family were interested in the search. The police ignored his warnings that Elizabeth could be a danger to Gabriel. He had no choice but to do everything to contact she. Unexpectedly, on December 27th, he received a message from an unknown number, but it was clear it was from Elizabeth. She wrote that he would never find his beloved son, Gabriel. She was leaving the country, and when she arrived, she would send him the exact address where he could find Gabriel's body. She also added that, earlier, she had strangled her son, Gabriel. After hearing these words, Logan could barely stand, but he immediately called the unknown number. At first, Elizabeth ignored those calls, but finally answered on the 6th attempt. Logan insisted that she was lying and that Gabriel was fine. However, Elizabeth claimed to have strangled the baby and put it in a trash bag with diapers and then threw it into a dumpster. She said it was revenge for his countless betrayals. After this, Logan contacted the police, but to his surprise, he was again told that they could do nothing. The police did not take what Elizabeth said seriously. The next day, the police got involved because Elizabeth will have to attend the final trial for custody of Gabriel, but she did not appear in court as expected. So they started looking for her. They quickly determined she had gone to San Antonio, Texas. Shortly after moving there, she sought employment and attended a nightclub casting to become a dancer. Other dancers remembered her well and identified her from photographs. She was seen attending the casting alone, without Gabriel. However, after that, she did not appear. From the first time we met, everyone realized that she had a very bad personality. Detectives found that Elizabeth had tried to get jobs at 2 nightclubs at the same time. However, then, her actions became puzzling because she didn't start working at either place. Investigators tried to determine the last time she was with Gabriel before she called Logan to report the murder. From trip records, they learned that on December 27th, she bought a bus ticket traveling between states. Gabriel did not accompany her on this trip from San Antonio to Florida. The investigation brought them to Miami on December 29th, where Elizabeth was arrested at a motel. Investigators questioned her about Gabriel's whereabouts and interrogated her about messages and a call to Logan. She denied the accusations, claiming she only wanted to annoy and get back at he. She mentioned she was heading to San Antonio to meet a couple interested in adoption. This was actually about illegally handing over a child to strangers. She claimed that she spent 3 days with they to ensure they were suitable and capable of caring for Gabriel. On the 3rd day, they met at a park. She gave Gabriel to they and left to begin a new life. She couldn't recall their names or contact details. But after some thought, she mentioned that the woman might be named Cheryl. It all sounds unreasonable, and the most confusing thing is that Elizabeth decided to leave Gabriel with a stranger, while Logan wanted to take care of the boy himself. Why is it necessary to separate the child from the father and find another family to raise the boy? That is illegal. Elizabeth had no answers to these questions. Law enforcement officers searched the San Antonio landfill using specially trained dogs, as there was a chance that the tip given to Logan was true. However, Gabriel's body was not found there. Then, authorities focused their attention on a family suspected of illegally adopting Gabriel. For Logan, this lead was his last hope of finding his son alive. Logan recalled a similar incident 6 months earlier. On that occasion, she went to the airport with Gabriel, seemingly planning to start a new life. Luckily, she didn't make it to the plane and was arrested by the police for trying to kidnap Gabriel. Elizabeth recounted that she cried a lot at the airport. And then, she met a 40-year-old woman named Tammy Smith. Seeing her hugging Gabriel and crying, Tammy decided to comfort her by expressing sympathy. She confided in Tammy that she felt incapable of being a good mother to her baby. Tammy then asked if she was considering giving her baby up for adoption. At first, she insisted that she wouldn't do it. Despite this, she and Tammy became friends after their encounter. They shared many similarities, particularly a difficult past. Tammy had worked as a dancer in a strip club and had been married to 2 men simultaneously at one point. She had a deep fear of being alone, which negatively impacted her life and relationships. She had been married 5 times and had 3 children with different men. All her children lived with their biological fathers, and she had lost parental rights. Unexpectedly, after 2001, changes occurred in Tammy's life. She decides that she really wants to raise her child and get her child back. There was no longer an opportunity to give birth again. So she turned to the services of the black market. During the investigation, it was established that Tammy adopted 2 children and was constantly looking for young mothers with problems so that she could adopt more children. She used social networks to persuade young women to give up their children and even approached pregnant women on the street, asking if they were planning to give up the child. After talking with Tammy, Elizabeth decided to give Gabriel up for adoption. Tammy became Gabriel's mother. When Logan learned of this, he immediately reported it to the police. Gabriel was taken from the Tammy home and returned to live with his father Logan. Tammy claimed that she did not know about the falsification of the adoption documents. Logan attempted to obtain custody to prevent Elizabeth from being able to see Gabriel again. However, the process dragged on for 6 months, which ultimately led to Gabriel's disappearance. After being arrested, Elizabeth launched a public relations campaign to support herself while awaiting trial. She frequently communicated with the media, gave interviews, and blamed Logan for the incident. She argues that if he agrees to let Tammy adopt Gabriel, none of this would have happened. Logan was shocked by her actions, which he perceived as driven by revenge. During the custody trial, he repeatedly sought sole custody, as he was the primary caregiver. Elizabeth wasn't interested in the boy and just wanted to get rid of him. Despite this, the court awarded joint custody. He tried to challenge this decision, but the court did not agree. After several months, Elizabeth faced multiple charges, including forging Logan's signature on adoption documents. However, the court considered this a minor crime, so it only imposed a 30-day prison sentence for signature forgery. During this time, the custody trial concluded. He was given full custody of Gabriel, but he still has no idea where the boy is. Investigators found no evidence of a crime, such as blood stains on the car, and did not find Gabriel's body. So they began to suspect that there might be a black market in child trafficking involved. This theory seemed plausible, since San Antonio is statistically a hub for black markets. Elizabeth had been in the city for some time, so it is likely that she had contact with organizations involved in child trafficking. During this time, she lived in a motel with her child, Gabriel, but later moved out without him. This is a common tactic used by these organizations, which often conduct exchanges in inexpensive motels to avoid drawing attention. Suspicion was heightened by the fact that Elizabeth had no relatives or acquaintances in San Antonio, suggesting her choice of location was deliberate. These factors all corroborate the initial story the detective shared after her arrest, suggesting that Gabriel may have been with strangers. The biggest challenge was keeping track of the child, which was almost impossible, as he was so young. There were several indirect signs. After arriving in San Antonio, Elizabeth posted on social media that if you want to do something, you will find a way to do it. In another post, she mentioned starting a new life. Later, she shared a photo showing 2 diamond rings. Logan knew she couldn't afford such expensive jewelry, valued at over $20,000. Elizabeth claimed they were gifts from admirers, but this seemed unlikely. This new information supports the theory that she sold Gabriel illegally, as payments for such transactions are not typically made in cash. During the investigation, the detectives contacted a young woman who had worked part-time as a nanny for Elizabeth when she first arrived in San Antonio with Gabriel. The girl was hired through an ad and looked after Gabriel for a day. She was shocked by how indifferent Elizabeth was to her son. Elizabeth didn't care if he was tired, needed sleep, or was hungry. The only thing Elizabeth requested was to give the boy medicine regularly to keep him quiet. Elizabeth simply wanted him to remain silent. The type of medication was unknown, but it was likely a sedative. Elizabeth spent 3 years in prison before her trial began. Initially, she was charged with kidnapping, but this charge was dropped. At that time, the law allowed a mother with joint custody to move across the country with her child, so it wasn't illegal. She was later charged with endangering Gabriel's life. The trial lasted 2 days, after which the jury found Elizabeth guilty. She was sentenced to 5 years and 3 months in prison. This decision angered many people. Logan was shocked when his 7-month-old son, Gabriel, goes missing, but Elizabeth is given only a light sentence. The prosecutor's office said they had no evidence to prove Elizabeth harmed or killed Gabriel, so no other charges could be brought against Elizabeth. Elizabeth denied the story she told Logan over the phone after Gabriel's disappearance. She continued to deny murdering her son, claiming instead that she gave the child to a couple. She explained that the message and call were meant to anger Logan. And she lied about the boy's body being in the dump. Detectives repeatedly questioned her in prison, trying to get information about Gabriel. Throughout this time, she never cooperated with the investigation, nor did she share anything with Logan or her lawyer. Elizabeth insisted that she knew nothing about Gabriel's condition. She also has no interest in knowing what happened to her son or where he is now. Logan was convinced that the child had been dead for a long time, believing she had indeed disposed of him at the dump, as she mentioned in the message. A recording of a phone conversation between Elizabeth and her old friend Temi surfaced. Elizabeth was aware that all prison calls were recorded, so she deliberately lied to distract the detectives. During the call, she praised the detectives for their work but then expressed outrage. Then, she confesses that Temi ruined her life. Temi got her involved in illegal activities. Temi's reaction seemed genuine, as she denied all of Elizabeth's accusations. The 2 women ended up blaming each other for their problems, which ultimately ended their friendship. It remains unclear who was lying during the call. In 2014, Elizabeth was released from prison and placed on probation for 3 years. However, she repeatedly violated the terms. Just a month later, she moved to New Mexico, which was a serious violation since she was required to regularly report to her probation officer. As a result, Elizabeth was arrested and extradited back. She was briefly imprisoned again. Meanwhile, the search for Gabriel continued, without success. Police occasionally receive new leads, but all lead to dead ends, including DNA analysis, reviewing CCTV footage, tracking geolocation, and searching databases. No matter how hard they tried, the boy was never found. After serving her prison sentence, Elizabeth was released. She changed her name several times to start anew and eventually got married, settling in New Mexico. In May 2021, she became pregnant again. This caused controversy. Many criticized Elizabeth, believing she shouldn't become a mother again, fearing she might abandon or harm the child. When speaking to reporters, Elizabeth continued to deny all allegations. In an interview, she claimed that her worst punishment wasn't prison but living without knowing Gabriel's fate. She insisted she had changed and regretted giving her child away, but few believed her. Gabriel's father, Logan, has devoted a great deal of time, effort, and resources to searching for his son. Years later, he had a new family, but he still hoped to find his first child. Although Logan tried his best, but the fate of Gabriel remains a mystery known only to Elizabeth. Logan continues to hope that Elizabeth will eventually reveal the truth so he can find his son. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Neville and June Bamber. June and Neville became the owners of White House Farm. A Royal Air Force veteran, after many years of service, he transitioned to a position as the master of a small local court. In 1949, June married he at the age of 25, and that same year, they moved into their new farmhouse. Their dream is to have children and build a happy, close family. However, June could not get pregnant. After numerous attempts, they discovered that the issue was genetic, and they would not be able to have biological children. However, they did not lose hope and they were able to find a way to become parents. The Bamber family adopted 2 children from an orphanage. First, they adopted Sheila, who was just 3 months old, and a few years later, they adopted 6-month-old Jeremy. June and Neville cared for and educated their adopted children conscientiously, giving them all their love and tenderness. As Sheila and Jeremy grew up, they ensured they received a good education by sending them to prestigious private schools with high-quality standards. The Bambers' financial situation was very good, allowing them to take care of themselves and their children fully and comfortably. Like any family, June and Neville also faced problems in their relationship. Not having a biological relationship with your children can sometimes make the situation more complicated. However, for the most part, their family life proceeded smoothly, without any major conflicts. In 1985, Sheila was 28, Jeremy was 24, and their adoptive parents, June and Neville, had just turned 60. That summer was so peaceful, with everyone enjoying the sun and nature, until the early hours of August 7th. At 3:30 a.m., Jeremy was awakened by an unexpected phone call. When he answered, he was shocked when he heard his father, Neville, on the other line. Neville's voice was frantic and distressed. He struggled to explain that Sheila had gone crazy and have weapons. While Jeremy still didn't fully understand what was going on, the call suddenly lost connection. Alarmed, Jeremy immediately contacted the police, relaying what Neville had said. He also warned them that Sheila could be dangerous. Despite the urgency, it took the police an hour and a half to arrive at the scene. By then, it was still dark, and the house was shrouded in shadows. The area was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos Neville had described. Since firearms were reportedly involved, the police approached cautiously, adhering to standard procedures. Then, they decided not to enter the house. Instead, they waited outside, wait for the task force to come and handle it. The police positioned themselves at a safe distance from the house and used a megaphone to try to communicate with anyone inside. For more than 2 hours, police tried to contact Bamber's family, but received no response. During this time, the police asked Jeremy to explain what had happened at the Bamber household the previous day. He explained that the entire family had gathered for dinner the night before. Toward the end of the evening, there had been a minor misunderstanding, but not serious. He also mentioned that he had left a pistol and a .22 caliber carbine with his parents. Both guns were in good working order and loaded. Nearly 3 hours after the first police officers arrived, at approximately 8 a.m., the special forces entered the house. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy and somber. The team cautiously advanced, inspecting the first floor. When they entered the kitchen, they found a scene of chaos. A chair facing down on the ground, and next to it, in a pool of blood, was Neville's lifeless body. He had been shot 8 times, 6 of which hit the head, leaving him with little chance of survival. His hands and face were bruised and scraped, with a broken nose and jaw, shows that he fought back drastic against the attacker. The officers completed their search of the first floor, then, they moving upstairs. Each step had to be made with caution to avoid noise, but this is very difficult. Because the floor is old and makes a creaking sound every time it is moved. On the second floor, in 2 bedrooms, they discovered 4 more bodies. They found June, Sheila, and 2 6-year-old boys, Daniel and Nicholas, all of whom had been fatally shot. June had been struck by 7 bullets, while Daniel and Nicholas sustained 5 and 3 shots, respectively. Sheila was found on the threshold of her parents' bedroom, with 2 gunshot wounds under her chin. In total, 25 bullets were used to kill the 5 members of Bamber family. Initially, police theorized that the Bamber family members had been deliberately killed. But who could have committed such an act? Was the perpetrator an acquaintance of the family, who had long planned to harm them and then finally carried it out? Or was the criminal so clever that he tried to fool the police with a fake clue? These questions remained unanswered, prompting the authorities to immediately begin an investigation. It is remarkable that although Sheila and Jeremy were both very well educated, they grew up with completely different personalities. Jeremy was introverted from a young age, preferred solitude, and did poorly in elementary school. Sheila, on the other hand, always had many friends around her. Jeremy is hot-tempered and has difficulty controlling his emotions. Even though his parents tried to educate him, but he still did not change. Eventually, they decided to send him to boarding school, which happened in 1970, when he was 9 years old. Boarding schools in England at that time were famous for their strict and harsh discipline, applied to all ages of students. Attending such institutions was expensive, but this was not an issue for the Bambers. As soon as Jeremy entered the boarding school, he realized he could no longer behave as he had before, as any disobedience was met with punishment. Unfortunately, he made the mistake of telling his classmates that he had come from an orphanage. His friends used that information to bully him. They often taunted him about being adopted, calling him a bastard. His years at boarding school were a challenging period for him. Although they didn't teach him many good things, they did help him improve his character somewhat. Over time, Jeremy became calmer, went on to university, and successfully graduated. Neville was extremely proud of his son and even bought him a ticket to Australia. For the next 4 years, he traveled extensively across the country, spent time living in New Zealand, and eventually returned to England in 1982. Upon his return, his parents, Neville and June, asked him to work on their farm. Along with the job, they provided him with a place to live, a cottage 6 kilometers from the farm, along with a car and a monthly salary of nearly $1,000, a generous amount for the time. They wanted to ensure that he had a comfortable life and did everything they could to support him. Additionally, they hoped he would help them when they were old. June, a very religious woman, had a hard time accepting the fact that her children had different views and attitudes about religion. Throughout her life, she did everything to guide them toward what she believed was the true path and to bring them closer to God. Unfortunately, her efforts were unsuccessful. So, she had suffered from severe depression, and her mental health had greatly deteriorated. At the time, mental health issues were treated with a crude and outdated method, administering electric shocks to the patient. It was believed that this could positively influence brain function. June's depression wasn't caused solely by her son, Jeremy. Her daughter Sheila, despite her calmer demeanor, also caused her great distress. Sheila enjoyed looking at magazines featuring models in provocative poses. Sheila dreamed of becoming a model and appearing on the cover of such magazines. However, she does not support this. But Sheila's problems don't stop there. One day, Sheila announced to her parents that she was pregnant. In many families, the news might have been met with joy, but the Bamber family is not like that. Sheila was still a teenager and unmarried, which made the situation complicated. June, her adoptive mother, faced a difficult decision. Should she pressure Sheila to have an abortion? As a Christian, June could not condone abortion, but at the same time, allowing the child to be born is unacceptable. Then, June told Sheila to make her own choice, but on the condition that if she had an abortion, no one in the family would know. This makes the relationship between June and Sheila more and more tense. In 1977, despite her parents' objections, Sheila is married to Colin Caffell. They on to have twin sons, Nicholas and Daniel. Initially, their family life seemed happy, but Sheila began to suspect Colin of infidelity. Her suspicions were correct, and she eventually filed for divorce. In 1982, they are officially divorced, which had a devastating impact on Sheila's mental health. She couldn't bear the shock from the divorce, so she fell into depression, and she was eventually admitted to a mental hospital for treatment. Nicholas and Daniel were sent to an orphanage, where they stayed for nearly 2 years. During this time, Sheila's mental health deteriorated further. She became increasingly anxious, frequently spoke about ending her own life and that of her children, whom she believed were possessed by the devil. She was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Meanwhile, Sheila and Jeremy seemed to swap positions with each other. Jeremy, who was a rebel for years, now lives a peaceful and stable life. In 1985, Sheila reconciled with her ex-husband, Colin. Together, they removed Nicholas and Daniel from the orphanage and start a new life together. In August, Neville and June invited Sheila and her family to visit, so they could reunite with their grandchildren, Daniel von Nicholas. They hadn't seen their 2 nephews in a long time. They decided that the family would spend a week together, after which Colin would take the boys on a trip to Norway. On Tuesday, August 6, 1985, Colin brought the boys to the family farm. And everyone gathered at the Bamber house. The day was filled with joy. There was a family dinner, a happy atmosphere, and delicious food. Later, Neville and June asked Sheila to take Daniel and Nicholas back to the orphanage, arguing that she couldn't provide them with a proper education. This suggestion angered Sheila. She replied that she would make the decision herself. The calm atmosphere of the evening was disrupted at 8:30 p.m. Around the same time, Jeremy left the house. Barbara Wilson, the secretary at Bamber Farm, called Neville regarding a work-related matter. When Neville answered, she realized he seemed very annoyed. In the background, she could hear raised voices, as though people were arguing or upset about something. This was unusual for the Bamber family, which surprised she. However, she couldn't learn more about the situation because Neville quickly ended the call and hung up. The next morning, everyone present in Bamber's house was shot dead. Jeremy, the only survivor, was informed of the tragedy. Overcome with grief, he couldn't hold back his tears. Investigators treated him with respect, allowing him time to gather himself before beginning their questioning. Jeremy shared everything he knew, including the hardships Sheila went through, and the argument that had occurred at the dinner table on the evening of August 6, shortly before he decided to leave the house. At first glance, the crime that Sheila committed seemed to be an act of desperation and impulsivity, because at the time, she was suffering from mental illness. After hearing Neville and June's suggestion that she should return her 2 sons to the orphanage, she felt the interference in her private life was unacceptable. When she lost control, she grabbed a weapon and shot Neville, June, Daniel, Nicholas, and finally shoot yourself. Investigators believe this is what happened. However, there is one very strange detail. Sheila had been shot twice in different parts of her body. How could she have managed to do this to herself? The actions of the detectives were puzzling. They decided to burn the blood-soaked bedsheets carpet where the bodies were found. They explained that they wanted to help Jeremy avoid the painful memories of the incident. Furthermore, the weapon discovered at the crime scene, which was a key piece of evidence, was improperly handled by the investigator. They picked it up with their bare hands without wearing gloves. A few days later, Bamber's family funeral was held, and Jeremy attended. He seemed distraught over the tragedy, weeping over the coffins of his sister, parents, and nephews. However, on that day, the investigation was reopened. Relatives of Bamber's family have expressed concerns about Jeremy's unusual behavior. Despite his tears, he made odd remarks, such as referring to himself as the boss. They found him smiling with the look of someone satisfied with victory. They reported this to police, causing police to conduct a more thorough investigation. Crime scenes need to be investigated carefully and meticulously to avoid drawing hasty conclusions. The detectives began by examining the weapon. They discovered fingerprints from several individuals, including the investigator who had handled the gun without gloves. The appearance of Sheila and Jeremy's fingerprints is not surprising. Jeremy admitted the gun was his, explaining he had purchased it for hunting. It is also understandable that Sheila's fingerprints were on the gun, as the initial theory suggested she had used the gun as the murder weapon. A few days later, Jeremy's cousin secretly went to the Bamber family home to search the house. He convinced that Sheila was not involved in the murder. By this point, Jeremy had inherited to his family home and was living there alone. During the search, the cousin inspected every room and the closet, and he found a silencer for a .22 caliber carbine. Length of the gun, combined with the silencer, made it impossible for the attacker to have turned the weapon on themselves and fired. This discovery strongly suggested that Sheila could not have been the perpetrator. If Sheila had fired the gun without the silencer, a new question arises: why were traces of blood found on the end of the silencer? Sheila, who had been shot twice and was bleeding, could not have removed the silencer and hidden it deep in the closet. This suggests that the silencer was attached to the rifle in the murders. From this point, everything started to become clear. Julie, Jeremy's girlfriend, suspects him of being involved in killing his family. She contacted investigators and shared some information. She revealed that on the night of August 7th, Jeremy had called her, saying there were problems. However, when she tried to ask what was wrong, he abruptly hung up. She also recalled that shortly before the murders, he had repeatedly complained about his family. Most importantly, she revealed that the Bamber family had drawn up a will, which stated that all assets would be passed on to their children after their deaths. This made Jeremy very angry. He did not want to share the inheritance with his sister, Sheila. In addition, Jeremy also told Julie that he wanted to kill his family and blame it on Sheila, a mentally ill person. She reported all of this to the police, not because she wanted to help the investigation, but because she was feeling angry, so she had just learned that Jeremy had a new girlfriend. However, there is no direct evidence to prove Jeremy's guilt. He tried to mislead the investigation. He gave the police the name of a suspect, a plumber he to have hired. However, when investigators questioned the plumber, they learned that he was completely innocent. He also has a solid alibi, helped to remove any suspicion against him. As a result, Jeremy Bamber became the primary suspect. He was taken into custody due to his inability to provide an alibi. However, the police released him after failing to find evidence linking him to the massacre. Surprisingly, he was allowed to leave the country. After inheriting the property, Jeremy's financial situation improved a lot. He sold Neville's car and to Saint-Tropez, France. Upon returning to England on September 29th, he was arrested and charged with the murder of the Bamber family. The trial began on October 3rd. One of the main points raised in court was about Neville's injuries. His body showed multiple bruises, suggesting that he had tried to defend himself from an attack. The medical examiner speculated that the injuries were caused by the same .22 caliber carbine. Sheila, a petite and frail woman, it seemed unlikely that she could have inflicted such severe injuries on her father. In contrast, Jeremy appeared capable of doing so. Neville's body showed signs of a struggle, with multiple bruises. Sheila also received several blows, but there were no signs of a struggle on her body, and her nails remained intact. The defense countered these arguments that believed that Sheila suffered from mental illness, which made her the prime suspect, capable of committing a five-fold murder. They emphasized that she grew up on a farm, was skilled at handling guns, and was an experienced target shooter. Additionally, Jeremy's lawyers highlighted that Sheila's blood was fresher than the rest of the family's, so they claiming that she ended her life after killing others. This, they argued, could have been due to guilt or the sound of approaching police cars. However, the prosecution disputed these claims. If Sheila had been the killer and then end her life, then the policeman on duty near the house, they will hear the last gunshot. However, no sound was detected. Furthermore, Sheila could not have pulled the trigger with the silencer attached, as it would have been out of her reach. The silencer was also found in a closet, rather than on the carbine where it logically should have been. The defense is in a difficult position because it has no arguments to refute the prosecution. According to the prosecution's argument, the motive for the murder stemmed from Jeremy's anger when he learned the contents of the will. In the will, the inheritance was divided equally between him and Sheila. His greed for the inheritance led him to plan a massacre. On August 6th, between 10:30 p.m. and 11 p.m., Jeremy left his relative's house and went home. Later that night, he returned to their house on a bicycle he had taken from his mother, June, a few days earlier. He took a roundabout route and entered the house through an open bathroom window on the first floor. He climbed inside, retrieved the loaded gun, and went to June's bedroom. Then, he shot and killed her with 2 shots. Next, he aimed the gun at Neville, but Neville woke up and tried to defend himself, leading to a fight. During the struggle, he managed to shoot Neville. After killing Neville, Jeremy returned to the bedroom and killed Sheila and her 2 children, Daniel von Nicholas. He then staged the scene to make it look like Sheila was the perpetrator, he placing the carbine in her hands. With his crime complete, he left the house on his bike. He called his girlfriend, Julie, almost revealing what he had done, and then called the police to report that Neville had allegedly called him. However, if Neville was threatened with a weapon, he would contact the police, not Jeremy. Jeremy's actions seemed to make everyone feel strange. Why didn't he come to the crime scene immediately after Neville's call? After considering the evidence and various assumptions, the jury deliberated for 9 hours and reaching a verdict. Ultimately, Jeremy Bamber was convicted of 5 murders and sentenced to 5 life terms in prison with no chance of parole. Jeremy, meanwhile, maintains his innocence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Douglas. Sarah Douglas was born in 1987 in Sacramento, California, into a family of 5 siblings. They always get along and help each other. From an early age, her parents commented that she was a girl with a gentle and cheerful personality. However, during her teenage years, her personality changed significantly. She started associating with a group of troubled teens, and to spend all her free time with them. As a result, she quickly dropped out of school. At the age of 19, Sarah started dating a boyfriend named Nicholas. In 2007, when she was 20, she became pregnant. By this time, her relationship with Nicholas was deteriorating, and they often fought over minor issues. The arrival of their child only increased the conflict between them, causing them to decide to separate. Nicholas moved to Santa Rosa, a city 150 kilometers away, where he began a new life with another woman. Despite being separated, he still cares for their son, and the two share custody. Sarah found herself in a challenging situation. As a young single mother, with a young child to care for, and education level is not high, she had difficulty making ends meet. Her parents were busy raising their own younger children and couldn't offer her much support. Although her mother and sister helped whenever they could, it still wasn't enough financially. She needed to find a way to earn money. Eventually, Sarah decided to work as an escort, drawn in by the good pay and flexible hours. She has an attractive appearance and quickly became famous in this industry, helping her earn a good income. However, she did not know much about the risks involved in this profession. After a few years as a call girl, she met Orville Fleming, a man who gave her the stability and security she had always craved. She hopes to quit her current job, find a husband, as well as a father for her son, and finally get her life on track. She believes so blindly in her dream that she does not notice the dangers around her. Orville Fleming was born in 1958 in California. Before he met Sarah, he was a happy husband and father. He dedicated over 30 years to his career as a fire chief, earning the respect of his community. He served for 24 years, including 3 years in Modesto. In 1993, he became a fire engineer with the California Department of Forestry. Thanks to his excellent performance, he was promoted to captain and became a battalion chief in 2012. Throughout his career, Orville built an impressive resume and reputation. He also worked part-time as an instructor at a fire academy, where he shared his valuable experience and trained future firefighters. Through hard work, he earned about $130,000 a year, enough to enjoy a wealthy lifestyle. When his children were grown, he and his wife could enjoy a comfortable life and their own pleasures. However, beneath the facade of this seemingly happy family lay a troubling secret about Orville. He spent most of his money on encounters with young escorts, as he found family life dull and craved excitement with attractive young women. He met these women through dating sites and escort services, and that led him to Sarah, a 20-year-old girl, 30 years younger than him. In his intimate relationships with these young girls, he sought the variety that was missing from his long-term marriage. His wife is a discreet woman, so he often turns to call girls to satisfy his private needs. After meeting the beautiful Sarah online, Orville began dating her regularly. She charges $300 an hour for each meeting. He became very fond of her, and their encounters began to occur more frequently. She opened up to him about her struggles, earning Orville's sympathy, which gradually evolved into love. He loved Sarah so much that he decided to divorce his wife to start a new life with her, and she agreed. Orville decided to take action immediately. He soon had a conversation with his wife, leading him to leave her and their 2 children to be with his mistress, Sarah. He purchased a house in a quiet suburb near Sacramento. Sarah joyfully shared the news with her family, believing that her life would improve and that she could finally create a stable family. She promised Orville that she would quit the escort service and never return to that line of work. Everything seemed to be going well. However, Sarah's family was concerned about the age difference between her and her boyfriend. She was only 24 years old, while her boyfriend Orville was 54 years old. old enough to be her father. However, he seemed to be a thoughtful family man, which helped ease their worries. They saw this as a happy time in Sarah's life and supported her, not wanting to affect her happiness. At the start of their life together, everything seemed perfect and joyful. Orville tries to arrange the house so that Sarah and her son feel as comfortable as possible. She gave up her job as a call girl and started a normal life, becoming a housewife. Their life felt like a fairy tale, a perfect home, and a loving relationship. Sarah wishes to have a closer relationship, and she also wants to marry Orville. Her dreams seem to come true when Orville presented her with an expensive engagement ring, adorned with a large diamond. She accepted his proposal, but her happiness was short-lived. Orville turned out to be very jealous and controlling. He was possessive and wanted to monitor her every move, making her report on everything she did. He realized that she was financially dependent on him, and he used that to control her life, making her completely attached to him. The relationship lasted several years until Sarah grew impatient. Orville exhibits obsessive behavior and wants to control the people she interacts with, even in public. This led to suspicions and arguments between them. Additionally, conflicts arose with Orville's wife, Megan, who was still legally married to him. He filed for divorce, but the process took a long time, giving her more time to pressure him over financial matters. By early 2014, the situation had become very tense. Megan frequently calls Orville to ask him to pay off his debt and give her more money. She was particularly upset about the large sums he spent on call girl service, which often left Sarah in tears. At this point, Sarah and Orville's relationship had significantly deteriorated. She began spending more time with her mother and sister, and during one conversation, she admitted that she wanted to end the relationship due to the mounting problems. Sarah realized that continuing the relationship was a mistake. However, she did not think that her decision to leave him could lead to serious consequences. On Wednesday, April 30, 2014, Sarah's day started like any other. She sent her son to visit his biological father for a few days and planned a vacation with her mother and sister. They first went to a casino where they enjoyed themselves until 11 p.m. During that time, Orville kept calling and texting her, but she chose not to respond. He was upset that she ignored his request not to have fun while he was away. As midnight approached, Stephanie, Sarah's sister, took her back to the house she shared with Orville, and they said their goodbyes. Once inside the house, Sarah immediately noticed a strong smell of gas. She went to the kitchen and saw that the gas burners left on. Alarmed, she called her sister Stephanie to let her know that Orville had neglected to turn off the gas. It was obvious he wanted to poison her. Suddenly, a scream was heard, startling she. Orville had unexpectedly shown up, disrupt her and Stephanie's phone call. Then, all Stephanie could hear was her terrified screams. Assuming it was just another argument between lovers, Stephanie decided to hang up and go to bed. Early in the morning, Stephanie decided to call Sarah to find out what had happened the previous night. She dialed Sarah's number, but was surprised when there was no answer, as Sarah usually stayed in touch. As anxiety grew over Sarah's lack of response, she and her aunt went to Sarah's house around 8 a.m. to check. They rang the doorbell and knocked for a long time, but no one answered. Just as they were about to leave, her aunt tried the door handle, and to their surprise, the door opened. This was unusual behavior, which made them even more worried, but they decided to go inside. Once inside, they found the living room in disarray, with furniture out of place and items scattered everywhere. They cautiously made their way to the bedroom, hoping to find Sarah. At that moment, a neighbor heard them screaming from the window. He saw them running out of Sarah's house, clearly terrified. When he asked what was wrong, they told him there was a human body inside the house. The neighbor immediately called 911 to report the situation. By 9 a.m., officers were on the scene. Several officers worked together to calm and interview the witness. In the bedroom, the officers discovered clear evidence of a struggle. A young woman lay face down on the floor, showing no signs of life. She had injuries on her body and neck, including cuts and a sheet tied around her throat. Blood was splattered on the bed and walls. In the bathroom, they found a bloody towel thrown into the washing machine. All the windows were tightly closed. They quickly secured the crime scene and started their investigation. Forensic experts arrived to gather evidence, and the body was taken to the morgue for an autopsy to determine the cause of death. The witnesses identified Sarah Douglas, who was 26 years old when she died. The autopsy revealed that she suffered at least 14 stab and cut wounds, likely inflicted with a kitchen knife. There were also signs of suffocation on her neck, which was determined to be the cause of death. Forensic experts discovered multiple bruises and evidence of beatings on her body, indicating she had fought back fiercely. Blood tests showed that at the time of her death, she was neither drunk nor under the influence of drugs. Sarah's aunt and sister informed detectives that she had previously worked as a call girl, but quit after meeting Orville. Despite their age difference, she believed he was a good man who could help her build a better life. However, their relationship had become strained in recent months, and she had decided to end things with him. Additionally, Sarah's sister Stephanie informed detectives about everything she heard on her cell phone the night before. It was likely that Orville attacked Sarah and killed her out of jealousy. As a result, he became the primary suspect in the brutal murder, and a warrant was issued for his arrest. Despite their best efforts to search for him, they still couldn't find him. He was not at home, at work, with his ex-wife Megan, or with his relatives. He had gone into hiding, prompting the police to place him on a statewide wanted list. Just a day after the search began, Orville's official car was found abandoned near a house, but there was no sign of him being there, nor any clues as to where he might have gone. Police have gathered detailed information about Orville and issued a wanted poster, stating that he is a particularly dangerous criminal. The database indicated that he owned 2 pistols, but they were not found in his car or at the murder scene. It is believed he was carrying them and may resist arrest. Citizens were alerted to stay vigilant and report any suspicious individuals, while also being advised to exercise caution and avoid confrontations with Orville, who may be armed and very dangerous. The search operation lasted over 2 days. During this time, family and friends gathered near Sarah's home, closely following the search and hoping for any news. They came to honor her memory as a victim of domestic violence. The media also took a keen interest in the case, tracking the police investigation closely. Orville's colleagues were equally shocked by the incident. They knew him as a kind, positive person and a professional with a stellar reputation who had consistently demonstrated his integrity on the job. However, it is worrying that he disappears soon after the death of his young lover Sarah, raising suspicions about his involvement. 5 days later, Orville was fired from his position as head of the fire department because he failed to report to work without any explanation. Given the circumstances, this was merely a bureaucratic formality. Meanwhile, the search is being extended to areas where he may be hiding. He is experienced in outdoor activities and regularly participates in challenging hikes. His endurance and survival skills are evident in extreme conditions. He is known for training in remote wilderness areas for long periods of time that few people know about. Even though there is a lot of information surrounding the case, the situation seems to be becoming more tense. Orville's wife, Megan, decided to make the situation more serious. She claimed that he and other members of the California Fire Brigade often invited escorts to the fire station for entertainment. Megan said she had seen videos showing these women arriving at the fire station and having fun inside the fire trucks. She also mentioned that a woman named Sarah had been present on a couple of occasions, the police received information regarding the situation and visited the fire station to speak with the employees and verify the details. However, they were unable to locate any video recordings or photographs that Megan had mentioned. Megan could not provide this evidence either, leaving the rumors unconfirmed. In addition, Megan also said that during the time Orville was having an affair with Sarah, he had run up a large debt due to his addiction to prostitutes. She asked him to pay the debt, but he never did. She also mentioned a diamond engagement ring that she suspected was fake. She also convinced the police that Sarah, Orville's mistress, had been stalking her, alleging that Sarah frequently called and threatened her. As a result, she sought a restraining order against Sarah, but this claim could not be substantiated as there was no evidence of harassment. It appeared that she may have fabricated these accusations to further tarnish Sarah's reputation in the eyes of the public. After 2 weeks of thorough investigation, the court denied Megan's request for divorce. On May 26, 2014, Orville was finally captured at a bus stop near where his official car was found. He had been hiding in the forest, but was spotted when he ventured out to buy food, despite having shaved his mustache and attempted to disguise himself. He was taken into custody without issue. He did not have a gun and surrendered to police. After his arrest, he needed special supervision. On May 20, 2014, Orville appeared in court. He claimed he could not afford a lawyer, but maintained his innocence. 10 days after the initial hearing, the city's road patrol began a new investigation into illegal activities involving members of the fire department where Orville worked. By October 2014, after the hearing had officially lasted more than a month, Orville formally pleaded not guilty. Sarah's family was shocked by Orville's arrogance, especially when he winked at the public defender. The prosecution detailed the troubled relationship between Sarah and he. He is portrayed as a jealous man who wants complete control over Sarah's life. He prohibited her from working, took away her personal bank account and mobile phone, and restricted her from using her own vehicle. Meanwhile, an investigation is underway into misconduct at the fire department where Orville worked. On December 29, 2014, the investigation confirmed that there was inappropriate sexual behavior between firefighters after hours. Although the video recordings mentioned by Megan were never located, but the investigation led to 16 firefighters being placed on administrative leave. In June 2015, the Orville trial entered its final stages. The defense presented defendant Orville in a favorable light, arguing that he was a victim influenced by Sarah, a prostitute with drug and alcohol problems. They argued that he was exploited and pointed out that he did not recall the argument with Sarah. This strategy was intended to help reduce the charges against him. As part of this strategy, the defense also sought to discredit Sarah. On the night of the incident, a violent argument erupted, which was overheard by her older sister, Stephanie. However, Orville described experiencing a dissociative state, likening it to being a zombie, as he went to the kitchen to get a knife. He then returned to the bedroom and stabbed Sarah multiple times. Next, he began strangling her until she showed no signs of life. He maintained that he could not remember the details, stating that the incident played out in his mind like disjointed fragments. Orville attempted to sway the jury by expressing deep remorse for his actions. The prosecution aimed to demonstrate that he was not telling the truth. They presented recorded interrogations where his statements contradicted his testimony during the trial. This discrepancy damaged his credibility and led the court to pursue a first-degree murder charge. On June 24, 2015, just 2 days after the debate ended and just before his birthday, Orville Fleming was charged with second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Sarah's death had a devastating impact, not only on her, but also on those around her. A few months later, her brother Leroy, who was very close to her, died, unable to cope with the grief of losing his younger sister. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kathy Sposito. Kathy Sposito is a young girl who has always been close to her parents. Kathy's parents divorced while she was still in school, but despite this separation, she remained close to both her mother and father. Kathy, after completing her schooling, intended to further her education and build a career in the field of environmental security. She had a deep concern for environmental issues and aspired to contribute towards the betterment of humanity. To finance her goals, she took up a job to save money for her relocation. With high ambitions, she set out to find a more suitable place to live. In early 1987, Kathy moved from Brooklyn to Prescott, Arizona, USA. The region was renowned for its scenic beauty, untamed natural landscapes, and opportunities for those seeking to fulfill their dreams. At the time, Kathy was 23 years old. In Prescott, Kathy planned to earn a degree in environmental protection while working as a waitress at a local restaurant to support herself. Kathy was determined to be financially independent and not rely on her parents for money. She rented an apartment, paid her own tuition, and prided herself on being self-sufficient. She was described as a kind, caring, and understanding person. Kathy's life was just beginning, and a bright future lay ahead of her. Tragically, her life came to an abrupt end. After moving to Prescott, Kathy decided to take a walk around the local attractions on the morning of June 13, 1987. She chose a trail located on Prescott National Forest Trail 33, which is a 2-mile route through a forest and mountains. The hike takes about 2 hours, making it a good workout for tourists and athletes. Kathy did not have a car, so she planned to bike to the trail and then walk to clear her mind. Around 7 o'clock in the morning, Kathy set off, reached the trail, and locked her bike to a nearby road sign in the parking lot before beginning her hike. Unbeknownst to her, terrible danger was awaiting her. Less than an hour later, several tourists walking the trail noticed a suspicious trail on the path that looked very much like blood, stretching a significant distance before abruptly veering off into dense bushes. Following the trail, the witnesses were horrified to find Kathy's body hidden in the bushes. The area was quiet and considered safe, located just a few hundred meters from the start of the trail. The eyewitnesses immediately called the police. While waiting for police, they inspected the area and found material evidence, which they handed over to the police. Unfortunately, this may have compromised critical evidence. When police and paramedics arrived, the body was identified as Kathy Sposito, a local student. She had been the victim of a brutal attack. The crime scene was horrific. 2 large rocks with blood and hair stains were found near her body, indicating that she had been hit multiple times in the head. Additionally, marks on her face and head indicated that she had been hit with a wrench. A local tourist later picked up the wrench and gave it to the police, inadvertently contaminating the evidence. Kathy suffered a hit by bullets wound to the eye from a .22 caliber pistol and a deep stab wound to the neck. The level of violence was shocking, suggesting that the attacker did not intend for Kathy to live. The medical examiner determined that Kathy's cause of death was traumatic brain injury and subsequent blood loss. Although there were no signs of rape because Kathy was fully clothed, later reports indicated that there may have been injuries to her genitals, leading police to believe that the perpetrator may have intended to sexually assault her, but was stopped before committing the act. Abels with her, and none of her belongings were disturbed, suggesting that robbery was not the motive behind the crime. The brutality of the attack shocked the community, raising fears that a mass attack was underway. As a result, a once peaceful area became dangerous and unsafe for all. Kathy's family and friends were devastated by her death. She appeared to have no enemies and was not involved in any illegal activities. She had a clean record with no history of mental health problems. The attack appeared random and brutal, leaving even experienced police officers baffled. 3 witnesses, children playing soccer on a nearby field next to the parking lot, reported hearing screams for help. However, they were frightened and did not know how to react because there were no adults around. A man on the other side of the trail also reported hearing a woman scream, but because of the echoes around him, he could not determine where help was needed. The densely wooded area, with steep hills and foliage, provided the perfect hiding place for a criminal to hide. According to the forensic expert, Kathy's death was almost instantaneous due to the severe head injuries she sustained. Her body was then dragged into the underbrush to conceal it from view. The entire attack occurred swiftly and violently, leaving little opportunity for anyone to intervene. As the police lacked any leads or suspects, they issued a public warning to alert hikers and walkers in the area to exercise caution. Informational signs along the trail warn visitors to be careful of bush, especially in isolated areas with dense vegetation. The area around the body was carefully secured. However, the crime scene was disturbed before the investigation began. Visitors who discovered Kathy accidentally trampled and contaminated the area, including potential footprints of the perpetrator. Furthermore, the first aid given to Kathy also inadvertently removed vital evidence from the body and created additional traces. The situation became worse when some tourists directly holding a wrench were discovered at the scene, leaving their fingerprints. DNA analysis techniques were not yet developed at that time, seriously hindering the investigation. 3 days after Kathy's body was discovered, on June 16, 2015, police announced that no suspects had been identified and there was no evidence of rape. Although some evidence was found, it was contaminated, and the technology available at the time was not advanced enough to properly analyze it. In an effort to gather more information, a public appeal was placed in a local newspaper, hoping to encourage potential witnesses to come forward. Police also interviewed people who had been at the park that morning, focusing on 2 people who were closest to the scene. Police made a specific appeal to these people, assuming that they might have noticed suspicious activity. Unfortunately, no one responded to the appeal. In a subsequent effort to gather more information, police decided to re-interview witnesses, particularly children, who may have heard something that could aid the investigation. Unfortunately, their search for these people yielded no clues. In the 1990s, with the advent of DNA testing as a widely used investigative method, the police sent the evidence to a laboratory for analysis and obtained test results. It is worth noting that the accuracy of DNA testing results at that time was significantly lower than it is today, and there was a high risk of getting inaccurate data. The forensic results showed traces of DNA from Kathy and an unidentified man. Upon further investigation, the DNA matched that of the forensic expert who performed Kathy's autopsy. This aroused suspicion among the police. Despite the strange coincidence, the forensic expert was arrested and questioned. He claimed that the DNA must have been accidentally transferred during the autopsy, which was a plausible explanation. The forensic expert then presented a solid alibi, and he had no previous connection to Kathy or motive for the crime, ultimately eliminating him as a suspect. The investigation hit a dead end, and for years, the police found no new leads. The failure of the police to find the culprit and bring him to justice caused widespread outrage. In an effort to find the perpetrator, several volunteer groups formed to conduct their own investigations. They utilized social media and gathered information, but found no valuable leads. Over time, similar brutal murders did not occur. This could indicate that the attack was personally motivated, targeting Kathy, or that the perpetrator went into hiding to avoid drawing attention to himself, or perhaps moved elsewhere to continue committing crimes. A new police team was then assembled to re-examine the crime scene and collect evidence. A seasoned police officer was appointed to the investigation. A promising lead emerged in the early 2000s. However, police attention was diverted by more recent cases that took priority, hindering progress in this case. After years of no further information came to light, Kathy's brother reopened the investigation in 2016. They returned to the crime scene, interviewed park staff and visitors, and appealed to the public for any information that might help move the case forward. Kathy's relatives reached out to her former classmates and fellow students, expressing their frustration that the killer remained at large. In an effort to reinvigorate the case, the family funded the creation of several posters that were displayed on advertising boards throughout the city. They also handed out flyers with details about the murder, aiming to inform as many people as possible in the area. The widespread use of modern communication tools, social media, and news outlets helped disseminate the information. As a result, Kathy's case once again attracted the attention of the state and the public after 30 years. A team of 6 experienced police officers was formed, determined to solve the case. However, they faced difficulties, as decades had passed since the murder, and many physical evidence and clues had been damaged or lost over time. Furthermore, the team had to deal with current cases, which limited the time they could spend analyzing evidence and following up on past testimony. The sheriff announced news about the case in a 2020 press conference, and despite the initial expectation of a breakthrough, progress was slow. A year after the sheriff's announcement, the police team investigating Kathy's case focused on analyzing DNA evidence collected in the 1990s and made a major discovery. A DNA match opened up new lines of investigation. An earlier police team was also formed, but eventually stalled. In contrast, the current police team prioritizes DNA analysis, hoping to finally close the case with Kathy's family and find the killer. The Kathy Sposito case went unsolved, despite attracting considerable attention in the 1990s. 3 years after Kathy's attack, a similar case occurred in the same area. A stranger attacked a young girl, hitting her over the head with a rock, but fortunately, her injuries were not as severe as Kathy's. The attacker dragged the girl into the bushes and raped her. The girl managed to free herself and flee, while the attacker was unable to catch up, hampered by his sagging pants. The case bore disturbing similarities to Kathy's attack, with the main difference being that the girl miraculously escaped her attacker. The second victim also reported her incident to the police, which led to an investigation. Although police collected DNA evidence, the case was ultimately closed and inconclusive. The victim, who wished to remain anonymous because she was still afraid of her attacker, provided a detailed description of the attacker. What puzzled police was that the victim believed her attacker was a teenager. Police officer Rich Winston suspects that the similar nature of the crimes and the close proximity of the attacks suggest that both attacks were likely committed by the same person. Because there was suspicion that the same perpetrator had been involved in both cases, the DNA of the perpetrator in the second victim's case was sent to a laboratory in Paran for genealogical analysis using a groundbreaking DNA technique. This method involves searching an extensive DNA database to find potential matches to relatives of the DNA owner. Using databases beyond those related to crime can help identify suspects even if they have no criminal record. Several public companies in the United States collect DNA samples from people who voluntarily submit them, often to search for their ancestors or long-lost relatives. Millions of people are in these databases, creating a huge data pool. Through the investigation, the list of potential suspects was narrowed down to two: the Bennett brothers, who lived in Pret at the time of Kathy's attack. Notably, both brothers had troubled pasts, growing up in disadvantaged environments and having had previous run-ins with the law. Police were initially drawn to Brian Scott Bennett for his violent behavior, including a sexual assault. Born on July 30, 1970, Brian was a teenager at the time of the attack, matching the age described by another victim. However, Rich Winston, the police officer leading the case, found this difficult to accept, as the extent of Kathy's injuries led him to believe that an older, more experienced killer had been involved. Rich even questioned the lab results and requested a retest. However, the results were accurate, confirming Brian's involvement in the crime. Brian dropped out of school in Kent and spent time in Prescott, Arizona from around 1980 to 1988. In 1989, Brian joined the Army, but his service was relatively short-lived. He returned to Prescott a year later, but didn't stay for long. Over the next few years, Brian moved around, living in California, Kansas, and North Carolina. His childhood and youth were marked by difficulties. Like many young people, Brian enjoyed partying at a young age. However, this lifestyle led to trouble, and he spent a short time in prison in Arizona for forging documents and checks. Brian's sentence ended in 1993. It is a disturbing fact that since his release, Brian has been involved in 4 assaults. Although he was charged in these cases, they never went to trial due to lack of evidence. In the end, Brian was acquitted of the charges. It was believed that his first victim was Kathy, who unfortunately did not survive the attack, and the second was a girl who managed to survive on the trail. The same day, he attacked another girl at a house party. According to her statement, he got her drunk and tried to rape her. He dragged her into a spare room, locked the door, and hoped no one would hear her screams. However, the other partygoers understood the situation and broke down the door. Brian escaped through a window, but was arrested the next day. Despite the arrest, the court was unable to prove his guilt in the case. The key issue was the inconsistent testimonies from witnesses, largely due to the fact that everyone had been drinking heavily at the party. Many considered the events that unfolded to be a joke, which ultimately led to the acquittal of the extremely Brian. Given the way Brian attacked his victims, police believe he may have been involved in several crimes in the area over the years. The incident occurred in the summer of 1993. Brian kidnapped a young woman named Renee, threatened her with a knife, and attacked her in her home. He then dragged her into a car and drove away. Fortunately, Brian forgot to turn on his headlights, and a police officer pulled over. Renee immediately reported to the police that she was a victim of kidnapping. Brian was arrested and Renee was rescued. Surprisingly, however, Brian was never charged due to lack of evidence. Police have investigated several other cases involving Brian. Among them are 2 survivors of Brian's attacks. One was attacked on a trail, and the other, Renee, was abducted from her home. Both victims identified Brian as the perpetrator from a photograph. With this new information, police need to obtain a DNA sample from Brian to compare with evidence collected at the crime scene. Unfortunately, the investigation hit another snag as police struggled to locate Brian. It was later discovered that he had traveled to several states in the 1990s before returning to his hometown of Kent. There, he lived as a recluse, avoiding contact with anyone. Tragedy struck when neighbors reported a suspicious odor coming from Brian's apartment, and police found Brian dead in his home. It turned out that Brian had taken his own life about 6 months after the attack on Renee. With no suicide note or expression of remorse for Brian's heinous crime, the police continued to pursue justice. In November 2012, Brian's body was exhumed and DNA samples were collected. The results, released in March 2013, were conclusive. The sample matched DNA evidence from the crime scene, proving that Brian Scott Bennett was responsible for Kathy's death. Finally, after 36 long years, the case was closed, bringing relief to all those hoping for justice. Hello, everyone. Today, we will learn about another case. The case of Chelsea Bruck. A party for 1,000 people seems like the perfect place to enjoy the festive atmosphere and have fun. However, horrors sometimes lurk just outside, bringing with them unsolved mysteries and hauntings. Chelsea Bruck was born in 1992 in Trenton, Michigan, USA. Her mother, Leanda, worked at a bank, while her father, Matthew, was a farmer. She is the youngest of 5 children. Chelsea has 3 older sisters, Jennifer, Megan, and Cassandra, and a brother named Nathaniel. She is especially close to Cassandra, who is only 2 years older than she is. But all of her siblings share a close and loving relationship. Chelsea's family exemplified a typical American household. They lived in a small town with a population of about 500 people, where everyone knew each other and crime rates were very low. Growing up on a 65-acre farm established in 1875 by her great-grandfather, Chelsea was raised in a supportive, religious environment with strong moral values. Her family also had been involved in agriculture for 4 generations. Chelsea attended a Christian school, where she spent her free time studying Catholic scriptures. Later, she transferred to Monroe Secondary School, which focused on sports, cheerleading, and football. After finishing her education, Chelsea continued to live on the farm with her parents and her sister, Cassandra. During this time, her older sisters got married and moved out. Chelsea had a passion for cooking and intended to attend culinary school to become a chef to gain experience. She took a job at a nearby restaurant called Olga's Kitchen, where she worked as an administrator and felt very happy in her role. Chelsea was a friendly, sociable, and attractive young woman. She loved to express her individuality, often dyeing her hair bright colors like pink and getting a small anchor tattoo behind her ear. When grown up, she maintained a close relationship with her parents. She didn't have a driver's license and wasn't particularly interested in getting one, as her parents always helped her with transportation. By the time she turned 22, she had worked for 4 years and developed a close circle of friends with whom she regularly connected. Chelsea loved going to parties, and one of her favorites was a rock concert organized by a local musician named Mike on his farm. Over the years, what started as a small gathering grew into a well-known event, attracting around 1,000 people, including attendees from neighboring states. Mike had his own band and also invited other local performers. This year, the concert was themed for Halloween and scheduled for October 25, 2014. In Newport, Michigan, which is about half an hour from Ferndale, Chelsea was excited about this big event and planned to attend with her friends Becky Brinson and Laura Taylor. At the event, Chelsea and her friends planned to dress as Poison Ivy from the Batman universe. Chelsea created the costume herself, using a swimsuit as the base and adding various details. After many nights of hard work, the final result was impressive. She crafted a costume that looked original and was worthy of first place. On Saturday, October 25, 2014, the friends gathered for the party. Laura drove them to the party, and they decided not to go home right after the event. Chelsea, now 22 years old, she intended to spend the night at Laura's place. She packed her things and set out for a fun evening. She plans to arrive at the concert around 10 p.m. However, it was still early, and the event had not yet started. Preparations were still in progress, but already hundreds of guests had gathered. Eager for a large-scale party, everything seemed well organized. There were several food and drink vendors, security guards ensuring safety, and parking appeared secure. The girls, who had attended this event before, could not have imagined that this time it would turn into a nightmare. After parking the car, they walked toward the concert venue. Since Chelsea's costume had no pockets, she had to leave her mobile phone in the car to avoid losing it. Nearly 1,000 people attended the event, many dressed in elaborate costumes. Alcohol was abundant, and some attendees were under the influence of illegal substances. These things created a lively atmosphere. Most of the people were unknown to the girls, who had gathered from different cities, but there were several familiar faces. Penny and her sister Heather. The group had a strong bond, having known each other for many years, even though Penny was 10 years older than Chelsea and had her own children. They all felt the energy of the event and enjoyed it. When the rock concert finally began, everyone reveled in the loud music. Chelsea and her friends quickly immersed themselves in the lively atmosphere. They happily drank and danced with everyone. However, because they were too excited to play, Chelsea and her friends lost each other. The situation was further complicated because all the girls were tipsy and disoriented by the noise and chaos of the party, making it hard for them to keep track of everything. Laura tried to locate her friend but was unsuccessful. Becky and Laura weren't overly concerned because there were many acquaintances at the party. They assumed Chelsea was with someone from her circle and would get a ride home later. Around 1 a.m. on October 26, Laura decided to leave the party and go home, unable to find Chelsea in the crowd. Laura gave Chelsea's personal belongings to Becky and asked permission to leave first. Becky woke up early the next morning, aware that none of her friends had plans for that Sunday. They all assumed they would sleep off the effects of the night before. She tried to call Chelsea's mother to inform her that she had Chelsea's things, but couldn't get through. She went about her day, and later in the evening, Chelsea's sister, Cassandra, messaged her to say that Chelsea still hadn't come home. Becky responded that she was spending the night at Laura's place. Everyone felt relieved, thinking Chelsea was safe. But when Chelsea still hadn't returned by Monday, it raised concern. Chelsea's relatives reached out to Laura, but they hadn't heard from Chelsea either. They began contacting all their friends who had attended and find that none of them had seen Chelsea since they lost track of each other that night. Chelsea hadn't communicated with anyone and don't post anything on social media, which heightened her family's concern. In a state of panic, they went to the Monroe County Police Station to report Chelsea missing. Initially, the police were reluctant to take the case because Chelsea was an adult, 22 years old, who had the right to make her own decisions, including leaving without informing her family. However, her relatives insisted that a search for Chelsea be initiated. Her mother feared that something terrible had happened to her. Immediately after that, detectives began looking into the circumstances surrounding Chelsea's disappearance and defined a search area between Newport and her family farm. As the search efforts continued, detectives sought the assistance of Mike, a rock performer and party organizer, and brought him in for questioning. He agreed to come to the police station to provide his account. Mike was not well acquainted with Chelsea and claimed he had no knowledge of her whereabouts. He did not arouse any suspicion, so he was allowed to go home. The detectives then spoke with the security guards who were present at the event. They stated that they hadn't noticed anything unusual. However, Chelsea's relatives suspected that Mike knew more than he was letting on, so they went directly to his house in search of information about their daughter. They intrusively entered his property, where the party had taken place, and began searching for clues themselves. When tensions escalated quickly, Mike permitted law enforcement to enter his area, wanting to avoid any implication of wrongdoing. Despite the organized search, the authorities found nothing relevant to the investigation. There were no leads. The detectives continued to interview attendees of the Halloween party, but it proved challenging to gather information, as it was a costume event where everyone wore masks and consumed alcohol. These were young people eager to make a name for themselves as a result of their conversations with the party guests. The detectives received hundreds of conflicting statements. Many of these claims were difficult to verify and took a considerable amount of time to investigate. Most of the information turned out to be false, likely due to confusion among people. However, some individuals seem to purposely exaggerate their stories to gain attention. Some of the statements are completely absurd. One partygoer claimed that a girl could have been kidnapped for slavery, while another suggested that a satanic ritual was taking place. With the possibility of someone being burned alive, the case quickly gained widespread attention. Information, rumors, and falsehoods spread rapidly among local residents. The media was filled with alarming headlines, including wild speculations about victims of satanic rituals. This situation deeply affected the family of Chelsea and Mike, despite the outrageous nature of some claims. The police had to investigate all theories presented by the guests. They discovered that there had indeed been a fire near the stage, reaching heights of 15 to 20 meters. After examining the area, they confirmed that no human remains were found. Ruling out the possibility of ritual murder, the search lasted several days and involved many volunteers, but no evidence was discovered. The friends of Chelsea felt responsible for her disappearance since they had left her alone that night and hadn't begun searching for her earlier. They kept a close eye on her social media accounts, hoping to find clues about Chelsea's whereabouts since she was alone. Her boyfriend was not considered the main suspect, however. The police interviewed all the young men who had any connection to Chelsea in recent years, searched their cars, and collected DNA samples from those individuals. During this time, rock singer Mike allowed a command center for the search operation to be set up on his farm and supported the police in every way he could. He even provided a generator so the search team could have electricity. A tent camp was established for volunteers and those concerned about Chelsea's disappearance, including her family and friends. The search for Chelsea continued almost around the clock. But there was little progress, despite the warm welcome and extensive help Mike provided to the investigation. Detectives remained suspicious of him. This was mainly due to his reluctance to communicate, which led them to believe he was hiding something. However, it was understandable why he felt this way, given the intrusive nature of the police presence on his property. Ultimately, all of Mike's belongings were searched, but nothing incriminating was found. The police suspect him of involvement in the incident because, before, when the police arrived, Mike was tackled to the ground, and they even threatened to shoot his dog. The reason for this incident was that when the police arrived, they found Mike covered in blood. It was later revealed that he had gotten dirty while rescuing his dog, which had fallen into a trap and was badly injured. He had carried the animal out of the woods in his arms. Mike was primarily at fault for hosting a party without ensuring the safety of his guests. As a result, he faced criticism from Chelsea's family and the police. Detectives learned from Gavin Hewlett, who provided new details to the investigators. He mentioned that a girl in the poison ivy costume was also looking for her friends after she had gone missing. She approached other party guests, asking about Laura, but no one offered to help. Distressed, she started to cry, and Gavin offered her his cell phone around 1 a.m. Unfortunately, she was unable to reach anyone and only managed to borrow a small amount of money. Chelsea felt very sad about losing her friends and being left alone. She declined his offer for a ride. Witnesses from the party reported that Chelsea arrived at the parking lot but felt stranded. Her belongings, including her phone, were left in the car, leaving her unable to contact anyone or find her friends. Consequently, around 2:45 a.m., Chelsea walked onto the gravel road leading from the parking lot, hoping to find someone she knew for a ride home. Although several people offered her assistance, she chose to decline their help and continued walking alone. This was the last time anyone saw her alive. Many attendees recorded videos and took photos at the party. The police gathered all available materials from the partygoers and are now analyzing thousands of images and videos. Some witnesses mentioned a man selling t-shirts that night. They were searching for him not as a suspect, but as a potential witness who might have seen Chelsea. When officers located the t-shirt seller, he reported that he indeed saw a girl in a bright poison ivy costume. Making her hard to miss, he gave to provide the police with some helpful information that a man wearing a sweatshirt and hoodie approached Chelsea. and they engaged in conversation around 3 a.m. She left with him. Their interaction seemed friendly, and they did not hug or flirt. This man was captured on multiple security cameras in the area. Using these recordings and the account of the T-shirt vendor, a forensic artist created a sketch of the man who may have been the last person to see Chelsea alive. This sketch was released to the media, along with a reward for any information that could assist in solving the case. The reward fund gradually increased from $5,000 to $30,000. Leaflets were widely distributed, and Monroe County was filled with photographs of Chelsea by that time. Approximately 300 leaflets had been handed out. Every community had posters featuring her photo, and the leaflets were even included with pizza deliveries. The police station began receiving calls from local residents with tips. Many leads were reported. Data was analyzed, and around 1,000 interviews were conducted. But none of this resulted in significant progress. A breakthrough in the case occurred in 2015, just before the new year. When a woman named Cree Carr contacted the police department, she reported that her boyfriend had confessed to killing Chelsea. Cree had confronted her boyfriend, who threatened her with a knife, and during this confrontation, he revealed that it was the same knife he used to kill the girl in the poison ivy costume. She managed to escape from him as he intended to chase her and her child when knowing about the high-profile case of Chelsea's disappearance. Cree wanted to assist in the investigation. The police were suspecting that the caller might be seeking revenge. As similar cases had occurred in the past, however, they could not completely disregard her call, so they decided to investigate during their inquiries. They discovered that the report was false. Cree up being one of 2 people arrested by the police, evidence showed that she was indeed a former acquaintance of Chelsea. The second individual detained was Harlan, a 19-year-old who claimed he intervened in a situation where 2 men were harassing Chelsea. He said attempting to rescue her before she was pulled into the fields. Later, Harlan confessed that his story was fabricated, and then the police received another call on March 22, 2015. A woman was cleaning her yard after winter when she found a red leather shoe without thinking. She discarded it in a garbage bag. Later that evening, her husband noticed the shoe and inquired about it. She explained how she found it while cleaning. He suggested that the shoe might be linked to Chelsea's disappearance, as she had been last seen wearing red shoes. Their home was located 7 kilometers from the party. Police had previously searched this area multiple times, and the couple was shocked that the searchers had overlooked the distinctive red shoe. Confused by the situation, she contacted the police to report her discovery. When officers arrived, they examined the area and the shoe. They confirmed that it closely resembled one belonging to the missing Chelsea. However, they found nothing else nearby. It turned out that this area had not been thoroughly searched before. The searchers were pressed for time and could not conduct a proper investigation before winter set in, and the snow later covered any potential evidence. As a result, the search was essentially ineffective. Soon after, another significant find was made. On the 15th, Eric Kassap was collecting scrap metal with friends when he stumbled upon a red wig while sorting through some debris near the railroad tracks. This wig was identical to one Chelsea had worn on the night she disappeared. Initially, Eric did not contact the police, although he was aware of the missing girl. He had not paid attention to her accessory. A week later, he saw another news report about the search for Chelsea wearing the same outfit and realized that his discovery might be more important than he had first thought. He began to suspect it could indeed be linked to her disappearance. Despite his initial hesitation, he did not report the discovery to the police right away because he was worried that his DNA might be on the costume. He eventually told his sister about the costume, and she insisted that he inform the police. A week later, Eric reported the items he had found to the sheriff's department. The police went to the location he specified and discovered a carnival costume and Chelsea's wig. As a result, Eric became the main suspect. He shared all the necessary information with the police, including his DNA samples, and maintained that he had never met Chelsea. The investigators pressed him for details, but he continued to deny any involvement. Eric agreed to take a polygraph test and passed it successfully. Meanwhile, forensic experts examined the outfit. They found that the straps had been torn off, indicating that someone had forcibly removed them from the girl, and the leggings were completely ripped. A forensic analysis of the poison ivy suit revealed brown stains that resembled blood. Further testing confirmed that the stains were indeed blood and belonged to Chelsea. By that time, over 1 million flyers had been distributed, but there was still no significant progress in the case. On April 24, 2015, John Markin was preparing his 5-hectare plot, which was densely forested. For construction, this location was close to where Chelsea's clothes had been discovered and not far from the site of a nearby rock concert. During the construction work, a bulldozer became stuck in a muddy area when the driver got out to investigate. He observed what looked like a human skeleton. He alerted the other workers, who confirmed it was indeed a badly decomposed human body without a face. Construction was immediately halted, and the frightened workers contacted the police. The driver informed the dispatchers that he had found human remains. John suspected it might be Chelsea, who was the focus of an extensive search in the vicinity. A piece of the remain clothing had been found, and the remain had light hair. When police to arrive at the scene, where they discovered a remain hidden in the underbrush and covered with branches and leaves. Right away, they were sent for forensic examination, and dental records were used to identify the body as that of Chelsea. The forensic expert concluded that Chelsea suffered a brutal death. Her murder was particularly cruel. Her jaw was severely disfigured, literally broken in two, and the bones around her eyes and nose were crushed. Many of her teeth were also knocked out. The cause of death was determined to be a head injury from a strong blow with a blunt object. Additionally, evidence indicated that she had been abused before her death. DNA from the perpetrator was found on Chelsea's body and entered into the police database. But there were no matches. Due to the poor condition of the body, more information could not be obtained. Therefore, the investigation for some time reached a dead end until 2016. When a DNA match was found in the police database, it belonged to Daniel Clay from Monroe County. His DNA was included in the database due to issues related to child support. Daniel had a troubled childhood. His mother was incarcerated shortly after his birth, and he was raised by foster parents in a local orphanage. He later developed a substance abuse problem after failing to secure stable employment. One of his former girlfriends became pregnant, but he denied paternity and did not provide child support. Daniel had a history of criminal behavior, harassment of women, and banned substance trafficking. Yet for some reason, his DNA had not been collected for the police database until now. On July 22, 2016, the police were driving the guy, who tried to escape but was caught. Daniel was taken in for questioning. Initially, he thought the police were investigating him for child support issues, but the detectives quickly shifted the focus to Chelsea's murder. He admitted to being at that Halloween party, but said he left early and denied having any connection to Chelsea, claimed he had never seen her before. Of course, the police officer did not believe him, as posters of Chelsea were displayed everywhere, making it impossible for Daniel not to know about her disappearance. However, he could not explain how his DNA ended up on the clothes and body of Chelsea. Investigators started using more sophisticated techniques to gather information. They employed a good cop, bad cop approach, which led to changes in the suspect's story. He admitted that he had forgotten some details, but he claimed that at a party, he had intimate with an unknown girl. He described her as wearing some kind of suit and said he didn't get a good look at her. The suspect mentioned that he got into a car with her, and after their encounter, they parted ways. However, this statement is obtained because he mistakenly believed that male fluids were found on the remains. In fact, the police did not locate any such fluid, but they did find his skin cells on Chelsea's remains, and on the straps of the poison ivy suit. His DNA was also discovered on the leggings, which were torn along the seam. This evidence suggested that the act was not consensual, and the police had not informed him about any intimate contact with the victim. Only a small group of investigators was aware of this information. Daniel eventually admitted to the crime after the suspect changed his story multiple times. Initially, he completely denied knowing Chelsea and claimed he had not been with anyone that night. However, during another interrogation, his account shifted again. This time, Daniel stated that he did intimate with a girl he met while leaving the parking lot. She got into his car and started flirting with him, although he initially responded to her advances. He soon became aggressive during their encounter. She asked him to bite, hit, and strangle her. He complied and strangled her for several seconds. Afterward, he realized she was unresponsive despite his attempts to revive her. She had no pulse. In shock and panic, Daniel drove for about half an hour along forest roads, trying to figure out what to do. Eventually, he disposed of her body in a remote area near an abandoned site. He could not explain why her clothes were found far from the body. Overall, his story was seen as absurd and unbelievable. Leading no one to trust his account, Daniel created an elaborate web of lies that ultimately led the police to lose patience and charge him with the murder of Chelsea. He claimed her death was an accidental result of a moment of passion, insisting on his innocence until the end. However, the medical examiner contradicted his claims, stating that the actual cause of death was a blow to the head from a blunt object, exposing his entire narrative as false. Daniel's girlfriend testified in court, saying she had never seen any signs of cruelty in him and found it hard to believe he could commit such an act. Meanwhile, another woman revealed that Daniel had confessed to her about the murder. The prosecutor argued that, on the night of the incident, Daniel spotted Chelsea walking alone and defenseless. He deceived her into getting into his car, then abused and brutally beat her to death. They was unable to clarify why the girl's suit and wig were found in one location. One shoe was found in another, and her body was discovered in yet another place. There were many unanswered questions in this case. But the key point is that Chelsea's body was recovered and the perpetrator was apprehended. To counter Daniel's false testimony, a special dummy was used to demonstrate how someone could be strangled for a few seconds right in front of the jury. It was shown that his claim was false because, in reality, it takes more than 3 minutes of pressure on the neck to cause death, which left a strong impact on the jury. Additionally, the prosecutor reiterated the injuries inflicted on Chelsea by Daniel. The brutality of the killer was evident in the manner in which he caused these injuries. It became clear that such a heinous act could not have been committed by chance. Daniel was found guilty of both abuse and murder, resulting in a life sentence without the possibility of parole, along with an additional 75 years for other acts of violence against women. Incredibly, Leanda surprisingly revealed in a media interview that she has forgiven her daughter's killer. She even gifted him a Bible, which he promised to keep. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Samantha and Tessara Crespi. David Crespi comes from a family known for its success and respect. He is from Sacramento, California, and both he and his brother, along with their father, graduated from California State University. David earned an accounting degree with honors in 1983. His older brother, John, is the pride of the family, having become a professor of economics at Kansas State University. With his excellent academic performance, David easily found a job at a local bank, where he quickly rose to the position of CFO. However, the bank eventually closed. He then worked as a manager at a mortgage company in Sacramento. David has 2 children from his first marriage. However, his life took a difficult turn when his first wife died of a brain tumor. David devoted himself to providing for his children during this trying time. Fortunately, he soon met Kim, a woman he had known since college. Their friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship, and they began living together in 1994. Kim married David and adopted his children. In 1997, they welcomed a son, and 4 years later, they had twins, Tessara and Samantha, in total. David has 5 children with 2 women. In 2001, David moved to a new and promising bank, prompting his family to relocate to Matthews, a small town in the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina. By 2006, David Crespi was a vice president at a bank and lived with his family in a comfortable 3-story house in a prosperous area of Matthews. They had lived in this quiet neighborhood for nearly 5 years, which was considered an ideal place to raise children. The family shared a strong, loving bond and maintained a warm relationship with one another. David was regarded as a caring and active family man. They were actively involved in their local church, where David served on the finance committee. To many, it seemed that David had achieved his dream. What appeared to be a happy life actually concealed deeper problems. From a young age, David struggled with mental health issues. On the surface, he seemed to be a kind, devoted, successful, hard-working, and intelligent husband and father. However, he often suffered from severe bouts of depression that would come and go without warning. His condition worsened after the death of his first wife, but it only began to improve when Kim entered his life. She did her best to support him, and they both believed that this would help him overcome his challenges. Unfortunately, it was not enough. David's mental health issues began when he was 20 years old. At that time, he faced typical challenges in love and difficulties in planning for the future, which left him in a state of sadness. Adult life turned out to be more difficult than he had anticipated. Despite this, David still managed to excel in everything he did and worked tirelessly, not realizing that his success came at a high cost. As a young man, David did not seek help and preferred to solve problems on his own. As an adult, his depression often stemmed from the increased demands of his job and the responsibilities he assumed. His family was aware of his difficulties, and his colleagues noticed when he occasionally fell into a state of depression. However, David usually recovered quite quickly. There were no serious consequences for his work life. People understood his situation. He could take a day off, but his colleagues covered for him and provided sick leave when necessary. Their support seemed justified because, while his depression was in remission, David excelled in his field. The situation became increasingly serious. David was a devout Catholic, as was his entire family, according to his faith. End life was considered a sin. Despite this belief, David frequently contemplated end life during his time as vice president and even attempted it several times without success. During this period, David chose to spend time outdoors, searching for a suitable place to end his life instead of working. His wife tried to intervene and save him during these moments. After each attempt, David promised his family that he would not try to commit end life again. David struggled with depression that he could not control. Simply promising himself not to harm himself did not help him dispel his dark thoughts. His frustration grew. Instead of feeling like harming himself, he began to have thoughts about harming others. One time, when David and Kim were stopped at a traffic light, he seriously considered driving into a crowd. His wife thought he was joking. Unaware of how sincere his feelings were at this time, David tried several prescription medications, but they were ineffective. His attempts to deal with his mental health issues on his own made him paranoid and withdrawn. He became increasingly anxious about losing his job and going bankrupt. Often imagining the worst-case scenarios, Kim encouraged him to see a psychiatrist, who prescribed him antidepressants. David agreed and committed to the treatment regimen the doctor gave him. David had been on one medication for years, but it caused him to gain weight, which frustrated him. Annoyed by this side effect, he decided to stop taking the medication and try something else. He returned to the psychiatrist, hoping to adjust his treatment regimen for better results. By 2006, he was very familiar with his mental health problems, which had become more frequent and intense during these times. He was haunted by thoughts of harming others David often thought about ending his life voluntarily, but because of his promise not to harm himself, he considered harming others instead. Although he saw his doctor regularly, he never revealed these feelings. Hoping that a prescription medication would help him manage his difficulties, he feared losing everything he had built. He understood that if his doctor knew about his obsessive thoughts, it could lead to serious consequences, such as hospitalization, loss of his job, or separation from his wife and children. He tried not to think about harming others and fought against these thoughts. David's last appointment with a psychiatrist was on January 19, 2006. Shortly before the tragic events occurred, the psychiatrist prescribed new medication, believing that David was struggling with sleep problems and anxiety. He had also recently changed his previous medication, which could cause weight gain. The psychiatrist did not notice anything unusual. David was very good at hiding his emotions and preferred to rely on himself. On the morning of January 20, 2006, David's family was at home. Kim, David, and their 5-year-old twins, Samantha and Tessera, whom David adored, were all together. David was on sick leave due to his battle with depression. At that time, everything seemed normal, and there was no sign that anything was wrong. At 11:30 a.m., David received a call from his mother. It was a routine check-in. She was aware of his mental health issues and called at the same time every day to see how he was doing, and if he needed any support. They talked for about 15 minutes, during which David reassured her that everything was fine. His 3 older children were at school at the time at 12:15 p.m., while Samantha and Tessera were having lunch. Kim was looking after them. She felt confident that nothing would happen to the children because David loved them very much. She believed that they would be safe with him. Kim had gone out to get a haircut after lunch. David worked on the computer, but then took a break to spend time with his daughters. He suggested they play hide and seek, and they scattered to find hiding places around the house. David went into the kitchen and laid out some knives on the table. He then began to search for the twins. He saw Samantha first. She was smiling and unaware of the dark thoughts in his mind. Deciding to end the game, he quietly took her to the kitchen. Suddenly, he picked her up and placed her on the kitchen table. He took a knife and began to attack Samantha. The little girl screamed and struggled, and then she stopped breathing, hearing strange noises. Tessera came out of hiding and saw her father attacking Samantha, even though she was only 5 years old. She sensed that something terrible was happening. Fearing for her own safety, she hid on the second floor of the house. Unfortunately, Tessera was easily discovered in the bathroom of the master bedroom. The little girl begged David not to hurt her, but David ignored her cries. He pinned her to the floor and began to attack her with a knife. Tessera cried, screamed, and fought fiercely against her father, but all in vain. Once a loving father, he had now left his 2 young daughters lifeless. David then considered end life, but ultimately decided against it. Instead of running away, he showered, changed clothes, and called 911. During the call, he calmly confessed that he had killed his 2 daughters and attempted CPR. Although he believed it was useless, as they were already dead, he answered the police's questions clearly, providing his details, his phone number, and his wife's location. He appeared calm rather than distressed and requested emergency assistance, expressing his desire to end his life. After the call ended, the police quickly arrived at David's home. David's home is located on Creek Road in an affluent area, where his family lives in a villa. It was surprising that such a tragic event could happen in a place known for its prosperity. When the police arrived, David was found sitting outside the house, waiting for them and for his wife Kim, who was still at the beauty salon. He surrendered and accompanied the police back to the house. Kim later returned home and learned of the situation. Initially, Kim feared that her husband had committed end life, but when she learned the truth, she was shocked. The police placed David under 24-hour surveillance and provided him with specialized clothing designed to prevent self-harm. removing any dangerous objects from his immediate vicinity. The case attracted considerable public attention, as a prominent and wealthy man faced the possibility of the death penalty, which is legal in North Carolina. It is reported that David may reach a plea deal with the prosecution if he admits to 2 counts of first-degree murder. The prosecutor's office will agree not to pursue the death penalty as a result. David could face life in prison without parole. Many feel that this sentence is too lenient for the deaths of Samantha and Tessara, 2 innocent girls. During questioning, David mentioned that he had been dealing with depression and suggested that his actions were influenced by a new medication prescribed by his doctor. David has spoken openly about his illness, seemingly trying to shift the prosecutor's focus to his condition, which he believes caused the tragic events. He stated that he had struggled with depression for years and had finally reached a point where he could no longer bear it. Over the past few months, his condition had worsened significantly. He revealed that he had intended to harm strangers with his car, but also admitted that he had darker thoughts about his wife and 5 children while they slept. Amid his financial struggles, he was overwhelmed by the fear of losing his job as a bank vice president. He felt disillusioned by his inability to provide for his wife and children, which left him feeling unstable. On that day, he heard voices in his head telling him that there was no future, that everything was ruined, and that he had to kill his daughters. David believed that the twins were also suffering from depression, which was why they were not attending kindergarten. He eventually came to the disturbing conclusion that killing Samantha and Tessara might ease his own pain and prevent his mental health from deteriorating further. Kim shocked many by forgiving and supporting David. Despite his violent actions, she felt the death penalty was too harsh and believed it would not bring her children back to life. Despite her heartache over the tragedy, Kim has repeatedly told the media that executing David would only cause further harm to the family. She expressed relief that her husband did not commit end life before the police arrived. Kim believes that his actions stemmed from mental health issues that he could not control, including severe depression and psychosis. She remains hopeful that he will eventually recover and return to the loving and calm person he once was. The Supreme Court is reviewing the death penalty. Some believe that David deserves the death penalty for killing his 2 children. However, the prosecutor was reluctant to pursue this option because it would be difficult to convince all 12 jurors. As a result, the inquest continues to investigate more disturbing evidence beyond David's confession. David's attorneys have prepared a strong argument against the death penalty, emphasizing his long history of severe mental illness, which has spanned more than 2 decades. Prior to this tragic event, David had no criminal record. He was a devoted family man and a respectable citizen. There was no history of aggressive behavior in his past, and he had never harmed his wife or children. As Kim and other family members confirmed, the defense argued that on January 20, David's mental illness led to the tragic deaths of his 2 children. The attorneys, along with all of David's relatives, believed that he was experiencing a psychotic episode at the time of the incident. Kim stated that he had been working hard for years to control his mental health issues and had been successful. They had consulted with professionals, and he had been prescribed medication. However, Kim felt that the treatment he received was not effective enough. Over the years, the family continued to seek help and adhered to the treatment plan, ensuring that he took his medication as prescribed. A psychological evaluation revealed that David had more serious mental health problems than initially thought, rather than just depression and anxiety. He was diagnosed with psychosis. It became clear that the medications prescribed were not appropriate for his condition. Several years before the incident, David had been diagnosed with genital cancer and had been successfully treated. On the day of the tragedy, he was scheduled for a follow-up appointment. His attorneys presented medical documents showing that he had been prescribed several medications, one for depression, another for anxiety, and a third to help him sleep. While on the antidepressants, David gained more than 20 kg and had difficulty breathing, which forced him to stop taking the medication. His doctor then prescribed another medication in January, but it did not resolve his sleep problems. He finally returned to the doctor. Just one day before the murder, medical records show that David's treating physician removed his sedative and sleeping pills and prescribed a different sleeping pill instead. After this change, David began to notice alterations in his mental state, impairing his ability to think clearly. The day before the twins were murdered, he became delirious and acted erratically. Experiencing extreme mood swings, this exacerbated his anxiety about not being able to provide for his family. However, management at the bank where he worked described David as having an excellent work record, with no indication that he was in danger of losing his job. Despite this reassurance, David's mental state left him vulnerable to irrational fears. He worried that he might not receive a bonus from the bank, recalling that he had earned $45 the year before, but doubting that he would receive the same amount again. However, he later discovered that the bank had approved a large bonus during this difficult time. David was not in a clear state of mind and could not think rationally while awaiting the hearing in the case of Samantha and Tessara's murder. Kim visited her husband frequently. She repeatedly expressed her deep faith and love for him, believing that one day they would overcome the challenges caused by his illness and avoid such terrible tragedies. Kim only knew David as a kind and loving person. She believed that inadequate treatment led to the deaths of their children and the pain the family endured afterward. The scene of the crime was tragic. It is hard to imagine the pain Kim felt when she returned from the beauty salon to find the police and paramedics carrying her daughter's bodies. In fact, David's troubled thoughts began long before these tragic events. At the time, David was being treated with prescription medications. The initial treatment regimen helped control his negative thoughts to some extent, but things changed when adjustments were made. Experts later concluded that the new drugs had caused acute psychosis, according to David's own confession. When Samantha and Tessara were only 1 year old, he had thoughts of harming them. One day, while walking with the girls in the backyard, he hid a weapon in his pocket. Fortunately, he regained his composure and realized that he needed to stop. He convinced himself that he could overcome his challenges and that his family's financial situation would improve. David later returned to the doctor, but avoided discussing his thoughts of harming his children. Instead, he vaguely mentioned having bad thoughts about harming others and expressed his fear of losing his children and family by withholding information. He likely misled his doctors. As a result, he was prescribed medications that he had taken previously, which led to weight gain. In his confession, David admitted that, for many years, he had often felt like harming a family member, but he had been able to control these impulses until now. He believed that he had everything under control and could never actually act on the harmful thoughts. David recounted that after his wife got a haircut one morning, he was working on his computer when the obsessive thought returned. It urged him to kill his children. He thought that if he did so, all his worries would disappear because he would have no one to care for. David realized that his mental problems were related to his actions. During his initial interrogations, David responded coldly. When asked why he killed both girls instead of just one, he explained that because they were twins, they needed to die together. However, the situation changed when David received comprehensive treatment. It was only then that he understood the severity of his crime. He admitted that he had never shared his thoughts about killing his children. His wife, Kim, did not fully understand the gravity of her husband's condition. David's doctor was not held responsible after the tragedy. Citing David's failure to provide accurate information, the doctor was unaware of many of David's hidden struggles, which prevented him from fully assessing the situation. Furthermore, all medications have side effects that can vary from person to person, and doctors cannot predict such severe reactions. David received support and treatment while in prison, which had a positive impact on him during his preliminary hearing. he began to understand the extent of his responsibility for his actions and fully admitted his guilt. Psychiatrists confirmed that he was fit to stand trial. David's family was shocked by what had happened. His father had seen him just a week before the tragic event. He appeared healthy and showed no signs of impending disaster. On July 30, 2006, the hearings took place. Ultimately, David Crespi reached a plea deal and pleaded guilty, while the prosecutor's office chose not to pursue the death penalty. This decision caused considerable controversy, dividing public opinion. With one group calling for the death penalty, the trial was brief, and the jury sentenced David Crespi to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The trial was short but filled with deep emotion. David's family cried, and he struggled to hold back tears as he came to terms with the pain his actions had caused. He felt he would be haunted by guilt for the rest of his life. Even the police officers who had arrived at the scene that day were in tears. A young officer went upstairs and discovered Tessera's body. He checked for a pulse, hoping she was still alive. The police carried the injured child down the stairs, praying that she would survive. However, when the doctors examined the body, it was clear that she had died from her injuries. What the police felt as a pulse may have been his own heartbeat. This story raises many questions. Was David truly unaware of what was happening at the time? Were his actions influenced by a psychotic episode? He appeared normal when he talked to his mother and wife and went to work. However, his actions were completely different. When his wife, Kim, left the house, everything seemed normal. But he caused a massacre right afterward. He considered end life, but decided against it and tried to calm down. So why didn't he try to control himself in the moment when he killed the child? Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Daniel LaPlante. In 1986, Frank Bowen, with his 2 daughters, Tina Bowen and Karen Bowen, experienced a series of terrifying events at their home in Townsend, Massachusetts. The girls initially believed that the house was haunted when strange phenomena began to occur, such as furniture being shuffled, strange noises coming from the walls, and threatening words written on mirrors and walls in a red material that looked like blood. These events left the family in extreme fear. Frank Bowen initially thought that his daughters were imagining things or playing a prank, but all doubts disappeared when he was faced with the terrifying truth. The person behind these bizarre events was Daniel LaPlante, a 16-year-old boy who lived nearby. In addition to trying to scare the Bowen family, Daniel secretly lived in their house for about 2 months. Taking refuge in the walls and narrow spaces between rooms, Daniel used secret passageways in the house to spy on and manipulate the family. The truth was discovered when Mr. Frank found Daniel in the house, confronting him with a weapon in his hand. Police later determined that Daniel had cut holes in the walls to move around undetected, turning the Frank home into a hiding place. Daniel LaPlante, often referred to as Danny, was born on May 15, 1970, in Townsend, Massachusetts. He grew up with his parents and 2 brothers. But his childhood was far from happy. Daniel endured various forms of abuse from his father, including physical, emotional, and abuse. After cutting ties with his father, Daniel began living with another man, who also treated him cruelly. Their home was an unhealthy environment, filthy and cluttered with garbage, with a yard full of trash and stray animals roaming freely. This atmosphere contributed to Daniel's growing disillusionment with life. He became rebellious, and his teachers frequently complained about his behavior. What began as troubling behavior eventually escalated into self-destructive tendencies. Daniel struggled socially, performed poorly in school, and was described by his classmates as strange, unhygienic, and unpleasant. Most avoided him because of his appearance and behavior, concerned by his actions. The school referred Daniel to a psychiatrist for help during their sessions. It was discovered that Daniel had dyslexia and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. While the psychiatrist initially appeared to want to help, He instead exploited Daniel's vulnerabilities. Over the course of a year, the psychiatrist coerced Daniel into an abuse relationship, further compounding the trauma he had already endured throughout his life. By 1986, as a teenager, desperate to escape his life of torment, Abuse began committing petty thefts in his neighbors' homes. Initially, he focused on stealing specific items, but over time, he shifted his focus to instilling fear in the residents. He started leaving cryptic, unsettling messages, rearranging household items to confuse the homeowners, and scattering crumbs and food stains throughout the houses. One of the homes he targeted belonged to the Bowen family. The Bowen family lived in Townsend, Massachusetts. In the same county as Daniel, the household consisted of Frank and his 2 daughters. The girl's mother had recently passed away from cancer, leaving the family grief-stricken and struggling to adjust to their drastically changed lives. When Daniel broke into their home, he noticed the family portraits, which radiated a sense of closeness and warmth. This enraged Daniel, who felt deeply unhappy with his own life. To him, such a family seemed like an impossible dream. It was then that he devised a sinister plan. Toward the end of 1986, one evening, Tina Bowen received an anonymous call from a young man who introduced himself as Daniel LaPlante. When Tina asked how he had gotten her phone number, Daniel claimed he attended the same school as her and had obtained it through a mutual friend. Curious, Tina asked if they had met before, and Daniel provided a false description of himself to spark her interest. He claimed to have bright blonde hair, an athletic build, and said he lived in her neighborhood. During their conversations, which continued for about a week, Daniel was very polite and charming, successfully gaining Tina's trust. After much persuasion, Daniel convinced Tina to go on a date with him. He offered to pick her up from her home, and his imagined charm seemed to win her over. However, when the big evening arrived, Daniel made no effort to clean up his appearance. When he showed up at the Bowen house and rang the doorbell, Tina immediately realized that everything he had claimed on the phone was untrue. As she opened the door, she saw that Daniel looked nothing like his description. His clothes were dirty, his physique was far from athletic, and his hair was dark instead of blonde. Despite her disappointment, Tina felt there might still be some trace of the charming man she had spoken with beneath it all. So, she decided to give him a chance. While they were walking together, Tina shared with Daniel that her mother had recently passed away from cancer. Instead of offering comfort, Daniel began asking her unsettling questions about her mother's appearance after death, what it was like to witness death up close, and the extent of her mother's suffering before she passed. The conversation was so unusual and inappropriate that it felt nothing like the casual evening chats Tina was used to. An hour into the date, Tina didn't leave, though she found the entire experience deeply strange and upsetting. She had never encountered someone so fixated on her mother's death, and Daniel's blunt, insensitive questions showed no regard for the pain she and her family had endured. This left she feeling profoundly sad. Tina later expressed her sadness to her younger sister, saying how much she missed their mother and how desperately she wished to speak with her again. One evening, while home alone, Tina and her sister decided to try contacting their mother's spirit using a Ouija board. They went down to the basement and, with little expectation that it would work, began the ritual. However, their efforts were unsuccessful. When they heard their father returning from work, the sisters quickly hid the Ouija board and went back to their room. Later that night, just after midnight, Tina and Karen were startled awake by a series of knocks on their bedroom wall. Excited, the sisters believed it was their mother attempting to communicate with them. They felt their spiritualism session had not been in vain. When they asked directly if it was truly their mother, a loud knock sounded on the wall, which the girls took as a definite yes. For several nights, strange events continued to occur, but only Tina and Karen were aware of them. However, when they tried to show their father the supernatural activity, nothing happened. It all began with faint knocks on the walls, but soon objects started disappearing. Items left on the table were found scattered on the floor the next day. the girls noticed furniture moving on its own, and food and drinks vanishing mysteriously. These occurrences unsettled them, and they began doubting that it was their mother trying to communicate. After all, their mom wouldn't frighten them like this. When the girls explained everything to Frank, he dismissed their claims. He believed the so-called supernatural events were just the girls acting out. Frank assumed Tina and Karen were seeking attention and tried to remain patient, convinced they would eventually overcome their pain. However, as time went on, Tina and Karen became increasingly terrified of their own home. The knocks on the walls and other strange happenings were driving them to the brink. Still, Frank refused to believe Tina and Karen. In desperation, Tina decided to confront the spirit directly. Now, she's certain it wasn't their late mother. Tina grabbed a knife from the kitchen and, along with Karen, went down to the basement. On one of the walls, they found a message written in red letters, which they immediately assumed was blood. The message read, "I am in your room. Find me." Terrified, Tina and Karen ran to the neighbor's house. Desperate to escape the torment they believed was caused by the spirit they had summoned, Tina and Karen anxiously waited for their father to return home from work. When Frank arrived, he immediately noticed the chaos. Upon seeing the message on the basement wall, he quickly realized it was written in tomato sauce. Furious, he lashed out at his daughters, scolding them for going too far and damaging their own home. He told them they needed a healthier way to deal with their pain, and even threatened to send Tina and Karen to a psychotherapist after this unsettling incident. Everything seemed to go back to normal. The supernatural events stopped, and the family began to relax. Life resumed its usual peaceful rhythm. The girls behaved calmly, and Frank continued his work as if nothing had happened. However, one day, a knock on the wall signaled the ghost's return. Tina and Karen, consumed by fear, returned to the basement, where all their troubles had begun. Suddenly, they heard another loud knock from upstairs. Panicked, they ran to Tina's bedroom, only to find a chilling message written in large red letters on the wall. "I'm back. Find me if you can." Tina grabbed her sister's hand, and they fled the house, seeking help from their neighbor, alarmed by the sister's story and their state. The neighbor promptly called Frank to inform him of what was happening. When Frank heard that his daughters were involved in another disturbing incident, he rushed home to address the situation. Convinced his daughters' actions were escalating, he decided to get to the bottom of it. Upon arriving at the neighbor's house, Frank questioned Tina and Karen about the events, shaking with fear. They said everything, including the unsettling message they had discovered, determined to put an end to their fears. Frank decided to go back to the house alone to investigate. As he stepped inside, Frank was met with chaos. The entire house was in disarray. Clothes and belongings were scattered across the floor. He immediately realized this mess was far beyond what his daughters could have caused. When he entered Tina's bedroom, he found the same disturbing message the girls had described earlier, and now an additional chilling note was scrawled beneath it. "Marry me, confused and uneasy." Frank felt something was terribly wrong. A shiver ran down his spine as he sensed a presence behind him. Turning around, his heart sank. In the corner of the room stood a young man. The man was dressed in Frank's late wife's wedding dress and a blonde wig, even more horrifying. He was holding an axe, though shaken to his core. Frank quickly realized one thing. This was no ghost. Frank chased the intruder until this man fled and disappeared from sight immediately afterward. He called the police. Investigators conducted a thorough search of the house and discovered a hidden space behind a closet in one of the rooms. Inside the wall, they found a small door leading to an underground cavity or passageway between the house's walls, large enough for someone to move through. When a police officer entered the hidden area, they found Daniel curled up in a ball in one corner. Daniel was arrested, with Frank identifies him as the man in the wedding dress who threatened Frank with an axe. Later, authorities uncovered more troubling details about the incident. Tina confided in her father about an unsettling date she had gone on with Daniel a few months earlier. investigators determined that Daniel had used the hidden passageways to torment Tina and Karen inside the space. Police found a sleeping bag, clothing belonging to the family, and leftover food. The most disturbing discovery, however, was that the secret space connected to every room in the house. This allowed Daniel to move through the walls undetected, spy on the family, and communicate with the girls through the distinct knocking sounds that had terrified them at the time of his arrest. 16-year-old Daniel was sent to a juvenile facility when he turned 17. Court documents were filed to begin trying his case as an adult. He faced multiple charges, including robbery, burglary, and property damage. In October 1987, Daniel was released on bail after his mother paid nearly $10 for his release after returning to his mother and stepfather's home. Daniel was instructed to stay out of trouble and await his court date on December 11, 1987. However, he ignored these instructions and resumed burglarizing nearby homes during one of these break-ins. He found a weapon, which he took with him in November. His stepfather discovered the weapon hidden in a laundry basket when confronted. Daniel lied and refused to reveal where he had obtained the weapon, although his stepfather confiscated it. It was unclear whether Daniel had access to another one on December 1, 1987. Daniel walked approximately 2 kilometers to reach the large, comfortable mansion of the Gustafson family. The family consisted of 33-year-old Priscilla, her husband Andrew, their 2 children, 7-year-old Abigail and 5-year-old William, and Priscilla is pregnant with their 3rd child. The Gustafson family were a close-knit family dedicated to helping others. Andrew worked as a lawyer and was often away from home, while Priscilla worked at a kindergarten, sang in a choir, and actively participated in their church. On that tragic day, when Daniel broke into their home, only Priscilla and William were there. At this time, Abigail was still at school. He overpowered Priscilla, dragged her into the bedroom, and assaulted her. Afterwards, he suffocated her with a pillow to muffle the sound, and then attacked her twice in the head. Once Priscilla was dead, Daniel turned his attention to William. He carried the boy to a filled bathtub on the 2nd floor and drowned him. Shortly after Abigail arrived home from school, Daniel immediately grabbed Abigail, took her to the bathtub on the 1st floor, and drowned her in it. Just like William, when Andrew arrived at the house around 6 p.m., he immediately sensed something was wrong. The children were not playing as they usually did, and his wife did not come to greet him in the hallway when he called out for Priscilla. There was no response. Concerned, Andrew went to the bedroom, where he discovered a horrifying scene. Priscilla was lying lifeless in an unnatural position, with bloodstains all around. In shock, Andrew called the police right away. He could not even search the house to find the children when the investigators arrived. They found Andrew in such a state of shock that he was unable to think clearly during their search of the house. The police discovered the bodies of the children. Among the evidence collected were 2 spent cartridges from a weapon, strands of the attacker's hair on the bed and on Priscilla's body, an open beer can, and shoe prints near the entrance. Suspicion quickly fell on Daniel, a recently paroled young man who lived near the Gustafson home. He was known for his skill in breaking into nearby houses, which made him a prime suspect. While investigators were searching for him, Daniel was at the city library when questioned about his whereabouts on December 1. He claimed he had been at a family birthday party. He denied any involvement in the case of the Gustafson family and expressed sorrow over what had occurred. The police initially appeared to believe his story, but later, they visited Daniel's home with additional questions and a search warrant. When Daniel was sitting on the porch, spotted the police car. He immediately realized they were there for him, so he fled and hid in the woods. Daniel's actions confirmed the investigators' suspicions were right, and them to search Daniel's house inside. They discovered several shoe soles that matched the footprints found near the Gustafson home. They also found fibers that appeared to be connected to the crime. A sock with saliva stains likely used to gag Priscilla, a .22 caliber shell casing similar to one found at the crime scene, and a cordless phone stolen from the Gustafson home. Additionally, the Daniel family's car was examined. They revealing weapon in the glove compartment. Police quickly called for reinforcements to search for Daniel, the main suspect in the case of the Gustafson family. Over 50 officers participated in the search, aided by helicopters and sniffer dogs that thoroughly combed the forest. A crucial tip came from an emergency call. The caller revealed that Daniel had threatened her with a gun and forced her to drive him away in her truck. Thankfully, she managed to escape. This information helped investigators identify the model of the car Daniel used to flee on the run. He committed several additional robberies, leaving witnesses at the scenes who later reported him to the police. Daniel LaPlante was arrested on December 3, 1987, at 6:03 p.m. while trying to hide behind a garbage can in Ayers Town. At the time of his arrest, he was armed and had committed several crimes while evading capture. Daniel's trial began in October 1988, when he was 18 years old, although most of his crimes occurred when he was a minor. The judge decided to try him as an adult. Daniel pleaded not guilty. Despite strong evidence against him, Daniel's defense claimed he was mentally unfit to stand trial, but a psychiatric evaluation determined that he could understand right from wrong and was fit for trial. The jury found Daniel LaPlante guilty of murdering the Gustafson family and sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. In 1993, Daniel attempted to appeal his sentence, arguing that the search warrant for his home was issued improperly, but he was unsuccessful. In 2000, Daniel requested a transfer to another prison due to safety concerns after receiving threats from fellow inmates, and this request was approved. Then, in 2013, Daniel expressed dissatisfaction with not being allowed to practice his religion freely because his rituals would have required ingredients like blood and banned substance. In 2017, Daniel submitted a petition seeking a reduced sentence, claiming he was under 18 when he committed the crimes, so he should not be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. He aimed to serve just 1 life sentence instead of 3 consecutive ones. However, his request was denied because he was required to serve time for each life he had ruined. His statement to the judge was as follows: "I cannot adequately express the weight of my actions. I have taken the lives of 3 innocent people because of my choices. A 5-year-old boy will never celebrate his 6th birthday, and 7-year-old girls will never turn 8. Their mother will not have a 3rd child, and I have robbed an unborn baby of its first breath. This woman may never hear the words, 'I love you' again to my family. I am deeply sorry for the pain I have caused. My remorse is profound and heartfelt." In 2019, Daniel LaPlante applied for parole again, but the authorities was decided that his request would not be reviewed until 2032. Many believe that Daniel lacks the capacity for remorse or any genuine feelings, and they see him as someone who is capable of psychological torment and brutal killings. This raises concerns that if he is released, he may seek out new victims.